Hello everyone, I'm very glad that you listened to my story. Please give me a follow and like the video if you enjoyed it. Feel free to comment and provide feedback so I can improve the sound quality. Yes, we invite you to listen to part 1 of the series. Chapter 1. Imprisoned. Dashang Dynasty, Imperial Capital. The falling snow, whipped into a storm by the north wind, raged across the city's streets. However, the blizzard dampened as it approached the imperial palace, obstructed by many layers of palace walls and glazed tile roofs. With her head down, 9th Imperial Princess Xia Xiaosu clutched a mahogany lunchbox as she hurried over to the archive chamber on the east side of the outer hall. From within the chamber came the sound of a young man's chanting. Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva. When practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, perceived that all 5 skandhas were non-existent, and was saved from all suffering and distress. Shariputra. Form does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not differ from form. Form itself is emptiness. Emptiness itself is form. The same is true of feelings, perceptions, impulses, consciousness. Xia Xiaosu stood at the entrance, listening to the chanting quietly. Her small face, often furrowed with caution and fear, relaxed slightly, if only because the chanter was her elder brother, 7th Imperial Prince Xia Ji, born of the same mother. 5 years ago, their concubine mother was assassinated while traveling with their father, the emperor. 2 years ago, her brother had fornicated with a temptress, resulting in him being placed under house arrest here. Day and night, he chanted as a form of repentance. Although the imperial palace was vast and massive, Xia Xiaosu felt that this man was the only person she was close to. She looked down, carefully prizing open the lid of the box to peek inside. The mutton soup was still steaming, which gladdened her. The chanting from the archive chamber slowly faded. At this point, Xia Xiaosu knocked on the chamber's door and pushed it open. Inside the chamber, a young man dressed in a cassock sat cross-legged by a bookshelf. Beside him was the Heart Sutra, which he had just closed. The young man's eyes were unfazed as if his time under house arrest had not disheartened him in the slightest. It was only when the young lady walked in that he smiled faintly. Xia Xiaosu quickly walked over to her brother and sat beside him, retrieving the mutton soup from the lunch box. "Brother, I made this myself. Eat it while it's warm." That meant it was not laced with poison. Xia Ji looked at her. The 9th Imperial Princess then pulled out a bottle of alcohol. "Here." Xia Ji smiled and began having his meal. The 9th Imperial Princess looked around, whispering, "They're such snobs." In the past, the archive chamber housed many skill books. It was a lively place where the wealthy, respected, and powerful visited to see the royal family's treasured dharma. Now, father has had all the skill books removed, leaving only the sutras for you. This is truly just shutting down any future you or I might have had. You never wanted to succeed him as imperial emperor in the first place. Are you not even allowed to refine your skills so you can at least become a carefree prince capable of protecting yourself? Mother was killed by the assassin because she protected him. How can he treat us like this? How could he? As the 9th Imperial Princess mulled over her resentful thoughts, she rubbed her eyes as tears began to flow uncontrollably. She did not want her brother seeing her like this, so she laid down and sobbed softly without facing him. Xia Ji took a swig of the spirit, easing his digestion. He then reached out and tousled the Imperial Princess' hair before pointing out the window. The 9th Imperial Princess stared outside. Beyond the window, the falling snow was swept by the wind to the north and the south. In the sky, its appearance alternated between resembling a soaring eagle and a surfacing leviathan. Xia Xiaosu's eyes sparkled. "Brother, are you trying to say that your aspirations are beyond my understanding? That being locked here for 2 years won't stop you from achieving great things?" Xia Ji laughed. "No, I'm simply saying that the snowfall is wonderful, and the weather is cold. Would you like some alcohol too?" Xia Xiaosu was instantly deflated, pouting and harumphing as she lay her head on her elbow. "It's fine. You're always so resigned to the state of things." However, the momentary distraction ceased her tears from flowing. Xia Ji drank the warm mutton soup, which was very much to his tastes. His sister knew him well. With one deep gulp, the milky broth warmed his insides. With one sip of the ginger-infused spirit, his limbs came to life. He did all this while Xia Xiaosu prattled away at his ear-side. She told him that the heir apparent had led a border campaign with 100,000 troops 3 months ago, going to war with the nation of Guifang. During the campaign, he was dressed in golden armor and fought with unrivaled prowess. The court ministers were unanimously optimistic and believed this to be his crowning moment. Xia Xiaosu spoke of how the third imperial prince was leveraging on his wealth, elegance, and good nature to visit scholars and sages throughout the lands. Finally, she recounted that the fifth imperial prince was humble and chivalrous. He worked with the Black Dam organization to investigate cases and even personally beheaded the great bandit Zhang Xia, thus earning his fame among the young heroes of the entire Dashang dynasty. In response, Xia Ji put down the mutton bowl and began to speak freely. The second imperial princess is valiant and formidable. She joined the Haoran Dao sect, practicing the Cloud-9 way. Although I wasn't able to attend the royal banquet last New Year's Eve, I still saw her dressed in white. She looked extraordinary, like a celestial. Xia Xiaosu. Xia Ji took another draught of wine, lamenting, I also once saw the fourth imperial princess. She was charming and gentle, admiring herself by lake-watching. Her appearance could be described as a beauty of the north, with a smile that could win over the hearts of thousands. If she lived in the ancient times, she would be a woman over which many wars were fought. Xia Ji thought carefully, then spoke nonchalantly, oh, and although the eighth imperial princess is only 17, she is well-learned and knowledgeable. Even the director of astronomy praised her incessantly, saying that she's a once-in-a-century prodigy. Xia Xiaosu sulked. Hey! Xia Ji laughed heartily, ruffling his sister's head. I've almost finished reading all the sutras here. Next time, could you help me find a few new ones and bring them over? The light in Xia Xiaosu's eyes dimmed, but she could tell that her brother seemed to truly enjoy reciting and chanting the sutras. He seemed fine with his current situation. But this too was fine, perhaps this was their fate as brother and sister. She replied softly, all right. When the snow stops, I'll ask the monk about borrowing some books when I head to the Lane temple to perform my rites. Xia Ji said, it would be ideal if you can borrow the present Sakyamuni Sutra. It's not like it's a book for refining a divine skill anyway. Xia Xiaosu nodded. Okay, I'll help you get it. She packed the lunchbox, bade farewell to this brother of hers who chanted day in and day out. Opening the door, she walked through the snowstorm that swept the imperial city, clutching her fur coat as she quickly disappeared into the distance. Xia Ji closed his eyes, letting out a sigh of relief. It had been a full 17 years since he had come to this ancient dynasty of another world. However, what had he obtained? Why did the talent he waited and waited for trigger only when he turned 15? If it were not for that, perhaps his mother would not have died. Moreover, perhaps he would not be imprisoned here. In his mind's eye, the scene that had taken place at the emperor's palace 2 years ago resurfaced. The emperor, filled with disgust, roared. Xia Ji, you, an imperial prince of my Dashang dynasty, dare have sexual relations with a wench. You have sullied the reputation of our royal family. How will you bear your transgression? I am willing to be confined to the archive chambers for 3 years. We shall allow it. At that moment, the emperor's steward soberly reminded him, Your Highness, the royal archive chamber houses many divine skills and other worldly techniques. The emperor coldly remarked, they've all been moved. All that's left are the sutras. Give them to this unfilial son of mine. As you wish. His thoughts returned to the present. Xia Ji raised his left arm, over which the dense image of 100 parading Buddhas suddenly appeared. When this happened, his hand grew to several times its size, making it look unnaturally terrifying. With the flick of a finger, the apparition disappeared. This was the 18 levels of hell suppression energy at its 9th level. He had obtained it from the Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's great aspiration. He swore not to become Buddha before hell was made empty. This ability allowed him to raise the earth, conjure a halo, and granted him unmatched strength. It's still not enough. My understanding of this world remains too shallow. I'll wait for the present Sakyamuni Sutra for now. Xia Ji muttered to himself, then sat under the candlelight. He continued reciting the sutra he had not finished. The talent he had awoken, Golden Finger, was very simple. It allowed him to obtain skill beads from any form of written material, and attain the 9th level in those skills. From the Buried Sutra he had acquired the 18 levels of hell suppression energy. The Buried Sutra was an ordinary Buddhist scripture. Chapter 2. Scrutiny. Throughout the past 2 years of Xiaji's stay, the once crammed archive chamber was a derelict place. Not even a single skill book remained. Still, he had gone ahead and read almost all the sutras left on the shelves. Buddha said, "There is no self in all dharma. That which lives suffers. Where does suffering come from? Only through persistence. Can attachments be broken? Then you will find your true self and attain nirvana." However, he did not listen to a word of it. He had pored over the Heart Sutra, reciting it for 9 days and 9 nights, gaining the Aryakalanatha form, 9th level, skill bead. This skill bead was stored in the temple of his head. From there, he could simply retrieve it whenever he wished and store it again when he did not need to use it. He had also flipped through the Diamond Sutra. The Diamond Sutra stated, "All things are like a dream, a phantom, a drop of dew, a flash of lightning, that is how they should be observed." He paid no attention to the contents but went ahead to recite it for 9 days and 9 nights, acquiring the 9 Sons of the Heart Sutra, 9th level, skill bead. Following this, he had read the Buried Sutra for 9 days and 9 nights, obtaining the 18 levels of hell suppression energy, 9th level, skill bead. The buried Buddha had a great aspiration, that he would not become a Buddha before hell was made empty. He did not harbor such a grand ambition, and even if he did, this particular one was not for him. That was because he was not Buddha. He was just an imperial prince imprisoned in the depths of the palace who had lost his mother and whom no one cared for. Even so, what he lacked in ambition he made up for in obsession. The body is a Bodhi tree, and the heart a mirror. Always wipe it diligently, lest dust falls upon it. Sitting in front of the window, Xiaji laughed as he shook his head. The long winter and vast sky of the northern imperial capital were like the scene from a great battle, the many swan feathers dotting the landscape like the stumps of broken limbs, with a blood-soaked scenery replaced by rivers of slush. He had already browsed all the sutras in the archive chamber. Those 3 sutras were the only ones from which he could extract divine skills. Most of the other books yielded martial arts such as Small Arhat Fist, Taming Tiger Vigor, Iron Cloth, Golden Bell Cover, Mantis Claw, Tyrant's Finger, and Strength of the Iron Bull. He had ignored these skill beads, instead absorbing them directly into his primal spirit. He stored them temporarily should the need ever arrive for them. He had read a few martial arts novels before traversing into this world, like the Murong family of Gusu, whose characters were familiar with all forms of martial arts. Murong Fu could use different techniques and even change tacks between blows. But what of it? After all, these skill beads did not disappear but were merely stored in his primal spirit. From there, they could be used at any time upon recital, and their effects manifested immediately. Thus, the 3 divine skills he had retrieved were the Aryakalanatha form, 9 Sons of the Heart Sutra, and 18 levels of hell suppression energy. Presently, he was waiting for the present Sakyamuni Sutra, as Lane Temple was the main temple located near the Dashang dynasty's imperial capital. In the past 2 years, he had realized that ancient books of supreme philosophy were more likely to grant divine skills. Lane Temple was already present at the advent of the Dashang dynasty. Moreover, the present Sakyamuni Sutra was Lane Temple's Mahayana Sutra. He needed that sutra. Yet, could Xiaoxiaosu procure it for him? He did not know. But he was already out of choices. He only had one younger sister. This was the only person he was close to. Although the palace thronged and the 2nd, 4th, and 8th imperial princesses that he had mentioned earlier were excellent individuals, they could not compare to a single strand of Xiaoxiaosu's hair, even if their merits were combined. It snowed the entire night. The next morning, the blizzard stopped. The palace maid sent him plain white porridge and some small appetizers. Xiaji thanked her warmly. After finishing his meal, he moved to place the empty bowl back into the lunchbox, but the maid urgently seized it. Although the imperial prince was disheartened by this, he was not someone she could risk offending. She did not know why, but the other imperial princes had exceedingly grand auras, simply approaching them was enough to make her feel stifled. Only the 7th imperial prince alone was approachable. Despite feeling this way, the palace maid dared not make conversation, lest she offended him. There were many rules in the palace, and nobody forgot them. Everyone knew their place because those who had failed to do so had already lost their heads. The palace maid had only walked a few steps when the 7th Imperial Prince's tranquil chanting drifted from within the archive chamber. Subhuti. Those who have developed the Anatarasamyaksambodhi should thus know, view, believe and comprehend all dharmas, and not produce marks of dharmas. Subhuti. The marks of dharmas are spoken of by the Tathagata as no marks of dharmas, therefore they are called the marks of dharmas. His voice was peaceful and neutral, like that of an elder monk who would sit in front of an ancient Buddha by candlelight, which greatly suited the palace maid's state of mind. It also made a eunuch at a gazebo 300 meters away nod his head inconspicuously. Xia Ji had been reading sutras for 2 years. This particular eunuch had also been secretly keeping watch over him for the past 2 years. The eunuch was a master. Those in the palace called him Eunuch Mei, and he was the imperial emperor's steward. By evening, Xia Xiaosu rushed to the archive chamber, bearing a cloth bag that contained the sutra. Before she could approach the chamber, a smiling rotund eunuch called out to her. The moment Xia Xiaosu recognized the person as Eunuch Mei, she bowed her head even lower, turning sideways to allow him passage. Although she was an imperial princess, she could not afford to slight this popular eunuch. Now that she had stumbled upon him unexpectedly, she considered greeting him before quickly moving on. However, it became evident that Eunuch Mei had no plans to let her pass. Blocking the way ahead with his fly whisk, he squawked, "His Highness had the 7th Imperial Prince chant sutras as a form of reflection. I ask that the 9th Imperial Princess not bring unnecessary books to disrupt his purification. If His Highness hears of this, he would be greatly incensed." Xia Xiaosu was so frightened she nearly began to tear up, hastily stammering, "Eunuch Mei, this is just the present Sakya Muni Sutra of Lane Temple. Brother had requested that I borrow it for his perusal." Eunuch Mei's eyes narrowed. "This is eye-opening to me. Does the 7th Imperial Prince truly seek the Buddha?" Xia Xiaosu nodded her head vigorously. "My brother is kind and his heart compassionate. He's been chanting sutras for these past 2 years. Then let me see it." Helplessly, Xia Xiaosu handed the cloth bag over to him. Eunuch Mei untied the cloth bag, revealing what was indeed an old sutra. "Please be careful with it. It was not easy asking the Lane Temple's abbot for it and I have to return it in 3 days. I know, no need for the imperial princess to tell me." Eunuch Mei replied as he rapidly sifted through the text. Buddhism had a strong presence in the Dashang dynasty, and Lane Temple was near the imperial capital. The eunuch was not unskilled and was naturally able to determine whether it was a skill book. He scanned it from front to back, doubling back a few times. In a joss stick's lifespan, he concluded that nothing was out of the ordinary and returned the sutra along with the cloth bag to Xia Xiaosu. His round face beamed brightly, "Go on now. A day the both of you get to meet is a day worth cherishing." Xia Xiaosu did not know what this eunuch meant and did not think to ask. Feeling a wave of relief, she bundled the sutra, walked through the cloister, and knocked on the door to the chamber. "Brother, it's me. Come on in." Xia Ji put down the diamond sutra he had been reciting. "This is the present Sakya Muni Sutra that you wanted. The abbot of Lane Temple agreed to lend it to me for 3 days, so you must return it to me by then." Xia Ji nodded. He did not ask how Xia Xiaosu had acquired it, though he suspected it must not have been an easy process. He ruffled her soft hair and gently said, 3 days is enough. A family from the book, Demigods and Semi-Devils. Chapter 3. Marital Union. By night the snow billowed. Such was winter in the north, the weather was unpredictable. Life too was unpredictable. Xia Ji lit a candle. The light was faint, but it rose to the sky, illuminating the bookshelves around him. The bookshelves surrounded him as if he had fallen into a deep well, in which he opened the present Sakya Muni Sutra. Page after page he turned. Word by word he recited. His voice was neither loud nor soft. Still, it was drowned out by the blizzard outside. He read into the night until the candle had melted to half its length. Xia Ji closed the book. His lone shadow fell upon the bookshelf. He muttered, "Cut your flesh to feed the eagle, give your body to sustain the tiger, then all who live will be equal. If all who live are equal, why the need to rend one's form? Why the need to discern between Buddha, Bhikkhu, and the guardians?" The pages were closed. A profound epiphany surfaced from within his heart. The primal spirit at his glabella slowly generated a golden skill bead, the Diana of the present. Seeing the color of the bead, Xiaji knew that his sister's efforts were not in vain. This was his fourth golden skill bead. As it was a golden skill bead, he used it immediately. The skill bead shattered, turning into a golden stream. From his glabella, it flowed throughout his body, to his blood, bones, organs, skin, and flesh, filling and covering it. In just half an hour, Xiaji had completely mastered the 9th level of the Diana of the present. This divine skill happened to complement his present shortcomings. Aryakulanatha form was focused on defense. 9 Sons of the Heart Sutra's emphasis was inner strength. 18 levels of hell suppression energy concerned strength. The Diana of the present gifted strong spiritual energy, and unshakable zen. What did this mean? Consider 2 people in this world who bore the same weapon, wielded the same strength, and mastered the same skills, and that one of them must die for the other to survive. The outcome of that battle would be determined by the strength of each person's zen. He who could defeat his opponent spiritually would survive. That was why 3,000 elite soldiers can slaughter rabble numbering 100,000. A master with a broken spirit was no better than a peasant. To put it simply, it represented one's essence, the wish of a meditative mind, the spirit of a warrior. In the lonely night, Xiaji stood up, opened the door, and walked out into the courtyard of the archive chamber. This was a place for the imprisoned imperial prince to take a walk and have a breath of fresh air. Naturally, eunuch Mei, who would be watching him from the gazebo 300 meters away, was not there. The entire imperial palace was draped in the night's heavy snow. All the lights in the palaces and halls were extinguished, although the sound of distant laughter still resounded from the emperor's palace. Following the stone steps, Xiaji walked into the heart of the courtyard, to a place where the snow fell. He did not put his hands together but raised his head to look at the sky. A mysterious zen suddenly permeated his surroundings. The snow falling around him abruptly stopped, suspended half a meter in the air around him. Although the snow around him was stationary, the snow continued to fall from above him. Soon, the pileup had formed a large white bell. Within this bell, even the air seemed to be still. Nothing moved. The snow outside the bell flurried excitedly, but Xiaji seemed to be stripped away and separated from the world. When the snow came close to him, it became completely still. Plucking the flower, I smile because I see that it has blossomed. The earth and sky are connected to my heart to the earth and sky. If I do not smile, the flower will not blossom. If my heart does not move, neither the wind, snow, grass, nor flower will. Was this the extent of the Diana of the present at its 9th level? Xiaji soliloquized, taking another step forward. With a snap of his fingers, the snow cover that surrounded him collapsed, causing the ground to cave under the weight of the accumulated snow. As this happened, the young man had already circled back to the chamber. In the evening 2 days later, the door to the chamber was thrown open. Xia Xiaosu poked her adorable face into the room just as Xiaji finished chanting. The moment their eyes met, the ambience immediately became warm and relaxed. The 9th imperial princess brought in a lunchbox, took its contents out, and placed them on the table. The dishes were still steaming. Finally, she retrieved 2 white jade porcelain bottles. These were celestial brews, a tribute from the outer treasury. Xiaji sat opposite her and handed her the wrapped cloth bag. I've finished reading the present Sakya Muni Sutra, so you can return it to the Lane Temple tomorrow. That way, you won't renege on your agreement of borrowing the book for 3 days. Noticing the 2 bottles of wine, he smiled. You even brought more alcohol today. As soon as he said that, tears flowed down the 9th imperial princess's cheek. She sniffled as she held up a bottle. I'll drink with you today. Xiaji took the other. Xia Xiaosu uncorked her bottle. Instead of pouring the wine into a cup, she immediately tilted her head and began chugging it. The wine was too strong, and she was a lady who did not usually drink. Promptly, she choked as her weeping grew more intense. By the time she put the bottle down, a few pieces of beef had appeared in front of her face. Her brother held them close to her mouth with his chopsticks. As before, his voice was gentle. You'll hurt your body if you have wine without eating. Xia Xiaosu ate the beef in a single bite, her tears flowing as she chewed. Xiaji exhaled softly, removed the cork from his bottle, and raised it. Very quickly, she understood and also raised her bottle. Their bottles clinked. As Xia Xiaosu wept, she boldly sputtered, "Bottoms up." Xia Ji replied, "Not bottoms up, just a small sip." The ninth imperial princess obediently took just a small sip before putting down the bottle. She cried as she spoke, "Why don't you comfort me? Although we can't do or change anything, will you, as my royal brother, not even comfort me?" Xia Ji's expression was calm, like a Buddha in a shrine, bearing no sorrow or joy. However, he was not Buddha. Concealed in his heart was chaos and disorder like that of the Big Bang, but he had grown accustomed to treating the only person he was close to with gentle affection. Thus, he asked, "What's wrong?" Xia Xiaosu bawled, "They're marrying me off to Tujue. They said that the land in Tujue is fertile. If I marry over, Tujue and Dashang can ally to outmaneuver Guifang and Quanrong, while repelling Luosha at the same time. They told me that this decision would bring great prosperity to the whole of Dashang and would be a great contribution to the motherland. But I don't want to go. I'm not willing to. I heard that the people of Tujue are savages and I won't be able to see my brother again once I go." Xia Ji spoke calmly, "Did they let you know when you'll be leaving?" Xia Xiaosu sobbed, "After 3 months. Once the snow stops and spring arrives, Tujue will send an envoy to fetch me." 3 months. Xia Ji thought for a while before suddenly saying, "I heard that the Lane Temple also has a past Dipankara Sutra. Could you borrow it when you return the other sutra tomorrow? I'll just need a day to read it." She exhaled a long sigh. Her brother was truly obsessed with the sutras. Was he obsessed to the point that he could not show a speck of concern for his younger sister? She spent most of the day in tears, during which Xia Ji kept her company. It was only when she was about to leave that Xia Ji held her in his arms. He gave her a pat on the back, and with his gentlest voice, whispered, "It will be fine." Chapter 4. Ascending Meru. Shariputra, all dharmas are marked with emptiness, they neither appear nor disappear, are neither tainted nor pure, and neither increase nor decrease. Therefore, the void has no form, sensation, perception, impulse, or consciousness, no eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, or mind, no sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, or reasoning, no realms from sight to consciousness. Under the candlelight. In the chamber. Day after day, the imperial prince chanted the sutras. His voice was sincere and bore a genuine indifference to the ways of the world. This made eunuch Mei, who sat at the gazebo 300 meters away, nod frequently. He held a fly whisk in one hand, a cup of hot tea in the other. Propping his leg, he sneered. The 7th imperial prince had spent the past 2 years reading sutras. His temperament had been worn out, judging from his actions yesterday. The 9th imperial princess had likely told him the news of her marriage to Tujue, but the imperial prince had not become outraged. It was evident that he had gone weak and soft. Xia Ji chanted into the afternoon when the sound of familiar footsteps came from outside. Shortly after, the door opened. The 9th imperial princess closed the door before turning and making an indignant face. "Xiaosu, what's wrong?" "Brother, the monk at Lane Temple told me that the past Dipankara Sutra was their secret Buddhist manuscript. The temple rules that only those who ascended the 9th peak of Mount Meru and bested the former abbot at the mountaintop in a game are qualified to read the past Dipankara Sutra. Mount Meru was an oddity beyond the imperial city. All year round, it was draped in mist, which only thickened the further one explored. Moreover, Lane Temple was only at its 5th peak. Xia Xiaosu continued, "I told the monk that you're imprisoned here, unable to leave the palace, and that you're requesting the book solely because you're obsessed with Buddhist teachings. The monk only said that the temple has its rules, just like the palace, and told you to give up on it if there's no chance of you leaving." Xia Ji thought for a moment before saying abruptly, "Xiaosu, find the emperor and tell him that I'd like to summit Mount Meru for a game. It's just for a book, and I'll depart by day and be sure to return by night." Xia Xiaosu was afraid of the emperor. However, considering that she only had 3 months to spend with her brother, after which she would end up in the wilderness, that endless hell, she shelved her fears. She nodded. "All right." By evening, the 9th imperial princess returned. The moment she came in, she smiled. "Brother," he agreed to it. "You can leave the palace tomorrow." Xia Ji beckoned. Xia Xiaosu walked to his side. Xiaosu, sit by me. Okay. The two siblings sat in the twilight of the archive chamber. All of a sudden, Xia Xiaosu sighed, lightly resting her head on her brother's shoulder. Her lips pursed and the spark in her eyes faded, revealing a mild gloom. Xia Ji reached out with his left hand to clasp his sister's shoulder, asking, "What did you promise him?" Xia Xiaosu's body quivered. She turned her head away and stared gloomily at the floor. The chamber fell into silence. The silence was broken as Xia Xiaosu started. "I promised him that I would willingly go to Tujue, that I would do my best to foster the alliance between Tujue and Dashang." Xia Ji's fingers remained gentle, only squeezing her shoulder ever so slightly as he pulled his sister into his embrace. Xia Xiaosu abruptly began to bawl, softly questioning and pleading, "Why? Why? Why are things like this? What did we do wrong?" Xia Ji allowed her to weep. "Cry. Cry as much as you need to. Then you will be able to grow." 3 months. That was enough. He lifted his head to look at the vast sky outside the window. His eyes were calm, quiet as the beginning of creation, the calm before the storm. The following day. Mild snow. Eunuch Mei had prepared the carriage. In a voice that carried a hint of mockery, he squeaked, "Seventh Imperial Prince, if you may." Without hesitation, Xia Ji immediately boarded the carriage. The emperor was already gracious in allowing him passage, so why should he permit others to accompany him? Eunuch Mei, on the other hand, was here to oversee Xia Ji. Naturally, the terms differed. The abbot of Lane Temple knew that the imperial prince was coming, but did not personally receive the detained prince. Instead, he had sent a young novice monk as their guide, who brought Xia Ji to the mountains beyond. At the forefront, the young monk led the way. Xia Ji walked in between. Eunuch Mei followed them in silence. At the entrance to the 9th peak, the novice monk stopped at the gate. Putting his palms together, he spoke, "Patron, please ascend the mountain alone. The match will be at the summit." Xia Ji immediately walked past the gate. Eunuch Mei followed him, but the young monk hastily added, "Eunuch, the temple has its rules. Only the challenger may ascend the mountain. Otherwise, they will not be allowed to proceed." Eunuch Mei objected, "I am the imperial emperor's steward, must I too be bound to your rules?" The novice monk responded, "Please do not inconvenience." Ignoring him, Eunuch Mei was about to push his way past the gate when Xia Ji suddenly interjected, "Eunuch Mei, if the temple has rules, they must be followed. If you insist on coming and I am unable to contend, I'll have you know that I can still speak to His Highness upon my return, despite being an imperial prince under house arrest." Eunuch Mei hesitated as he weighed out the situation. There was no need for him to entangle himself with this already forsaken prince. If he truly upset the emperor, he would have much to lose. Considering this, he laughed his remark off. "Very well. I'll wait down here for the imperial prince." From across the threshold, the young monk breathed a sigh of relief and gave Xia Ji a friendly smile. Naturally, Xia Ji did not mean to help him, he simply did not want Eunuch Mei standing behind him during the match. Beyond the gate was a snow-capped ridge. In the distance, the mist draped the mountains. Step by step, the imperial prince of Dashang climbed, leaving the monk and the eunuch far behind, as he slowly disappeared into the sea of thick winter mist. He came here not to seek Buddha, but to acquire the sutra. An hour later, Xia Ji had already reached the mountaintop. The summit was a plateau. The fog was sparse here, though the surroundings remained overcast. It was as if he was walking in the sky, unable to see the human realm below him. Xia Ji looked up. In the middle of the plateau was a huge boulder that looked like a natural game board. On the other side of this board, an old monk sat with his legs crossed. Seeing the arrival of a person, the old monk did not invite him to sit before continuing to speak. "I heard from the abbot that you wish to set your eyes on the past Dipankara Sutra. If you want to read it, you must pass the trial. This trial does not test one's skill, but one's zen. If your zen is insufficient, the trial will cause your hair to whiten and your body to age several decades. From then on, your heart will feel as though it is suppressed by a nightmare. Unless you fast from certain foods and chant sutras day and night, constantly abiding with the ancient Buddha by candlelight, you will not achieve inner peace." Xia Ji nodded solemnly, indicating that he understood. then walked to the board side opposite the old monk. Halt! The old monk's voice sounded again. Do you believe that my words are too enigmatic and that this is but a ruse? Xia Ji stopped in his tracks. He shook his head. I have yet to assume so. The old monk shook his head, believing that the young imperial prince before him still did not understand the gravity of the matter at hand, that he was completely oblivious to the nature of the match he was going to play. He sighed. Then before you take a seat, listen to this story I have to tell. If you still wish to continue after the story is finished, then it will be fated karma, to which I will no longer object. Chapter 5. The Game That Leaped Through Time. Go on then. Once upon a time, there was a woodcutter who went to a barren mountain to forage wood. At the mountaintop, he saw two people playing a board game, TN. The game in question is an ancient version of Chinese Go with similar rules. Most days, the woodcutter enjoyed such matches, so he went over to watch them. Immediately, he became engrossed. By the time the match had finished, the two players told him to hurry home, lest he be unable to see his wife again. The woodcutter froze, not understanding what they meant. Only when he turned his head did he notice that the wooden handle of his axe had already rotted away. I've heard of this ancient folktale regarding a man who had leaped through time before. The old monk said, then you would know that this mountain was the barren mountain where that match was played. This is the 9th peak of Mount Meru. Although the two celestials have left, they imbued this board with tremendous spiritual power. The moment a match begins, the player will be so immersed that they will experience the game personally and feel what they had experienced. One will be unable to extricate themselves and the match will seem to last a lifetime. Those without great perseverance and wisdom will not be able to play this game. Despite all this, do you still wish to play? Xia Ji asked, how is it played? Do each of us pick a color and take turns? No, the old monk's brows sunk as he closed his eyes. This match is a precious obscurity and also a bitter sea. Xia Ji laughed before asking bluntly, is it a matter of life and death? The old monk elaborated, the bitter sea is endless, and the shore will be behind you. I see that you have a great desire, but I advise you, all who live toil, many others suffer, tire and hurt more than you do. Will you not put an end to your worries and obsessions? After all, the world of mortals is but a dream. Xia Ji answered with a question of his own, why should I put an end to them? The old monk spat, seek yourself. Xia Ji took a step forward and sat beside the game board that lingered with celestial energy without hesitation. He calmly asked, what if I already sought myself and saw that my calling is not to turn back to shore? Only at this point did the old monk open his eyes to size up the young men in front of him. Either way, he had already sat down and made his choice. In that case, this was his fated karma. The old monk put his palms together and said, Amitabha. Regardless of the outcome, the 7th imperial prince's courage was truly commendable. As he sat down, he was ready to start. At this moment, the trial of Zen began. The old monk asked, what do you see? Xia Ji did not answer, focusing solely on the board in front of him. Clearly, this involved immediate action and not strategic planning. The setup was, in truth, rather simple. Black and white were like two dragons that were interlocked in battle, both surrounded by other pieces from all sides. Seeing that he did not answer, the old monk did not ask further, but simply stated, once you have decided, take the black piece. That is when the match truly begins. Xia Ji immediately reached out, his fingers clasping the black piece. He still had to hurry back to the imperial palace after the match. However, the moment he lifted the black piece, a mysterious and abstract thought rushed into his mind, evoking a complete change in his surroundings. In an instant, he was a traveler wandering the barren plains. At present, he was urgently on his way home. His identity as 7th imperial prince of the Dashang dynasty, the recent climb to Mount Meru's peak, and the game that leaped through time had all become an absurd dream from last night's sleep. They bore no relation to his current situation. In the air, a hungry eagle was hunting a poor dove. In an instant, the dove dived into Xia Ji's arms. Above Xia Ji, the eagle circled. The dove suddenly spoke in human tongue, please let me go. If you release me you can still find other food, but I only have this one life. The eagle also spoke. I'm starving. If I don't eat you now, I will surely die. Two tremendous notions abruptly sprung into Xia Ji's mind. I am willing. Or am I unwilling? Viewing the predicament, the eagle reasoned, if you protect the dove and save its life, would you have me starve to death? Following those words, the two impulses grew more intense, becoming a powerful psychological attack that impacted Xiaoji's thoughts. He compulsively shook his head, seeking clarity. With a shake, the dove in his arms transformed into a rabbit, and the eagle that hovered in the sky turned into a gaunt tiger. With another shake, the entire scene began to change continuously. With every alteration, the desires in his mind grew even stronger. The intensity continued to compound, eventually turning into two cries, demanding his choice. Was he willing? Or was he unwilling? Slowly, the barren plains disappeared. Everything had disappeared. All that was left in this world was him and those two creatures. The only solution was for him to carve off a portion of his flesh equal to the weight of the prey and give it to the predator. By doing this, he would be sacrificing himself to save the only two lives of this world. This was an immeasurable degree of altruism. To cut. Or not to cut. The two cries intensified until they became white noise. On the 9th peak of Mount Meru, the old monk sat watching the imperial prince, eyes closed, brows twitching uncontrollably. The black piece in his right hand was slowly descending. The struggle of this match was not where the piece fell, but whether one was capable of placing it in the first place. If one was willing, that would put oneself to death by the cleaving of 3 pounds of one's flesh. If one was unwilling, that simply delayed the inevitable by several intervals. Still, it would ultimately result in complete failure and a loss that one would regret. Most importantly, this piece was not played by one's hand, but by one's meditative mind. No one could cheat, for the Celestials did not regard technique, but Zen. What is Zen? Zen is what appears simple but is in truth arduous. It seems to be right in front of oneself but is actually far on the horizon. The piece Xiaoji held was but a foot away from the board. However, this mere foot spanned the ends of the earth. This stretch was the bitter sea that the old monk had referred to. Only those who could persevere through this bitter sea were qualified to read the Lane Temple's secret Buddhist manuscript, the past Dipankara Sutra. The old monk did not feel that the imperial prince would succeed, as he had already been around for 20 years. The imperial prince was not the first person to come here. The many others before him were well-renowned, possessing wisdom, courage, and strength beyond him, but none succeeded. All of them knew the move that had to be played, but the moment they entered the match, they were unable to place it. Was this not life? Although you knew that there were simple, trivial things that ought to be done, they were things you simply cannot do. This showed the need for Zen. The ordinary. That is Zen. To be willing. You know. But can you do it? You understand. But are you truly willing? Suddenly, the old monk's expression shifted, because the 7th imperial prince by the name of Xiaoji had carved off 3 pounds of his flesh, feeding it to the predator. His eyes flew open as his hair danced wildly. With a clack, the piece landed where it was supposed to. The old monk looked into the imperial prince's eyes. However, he did not see the compassion he wanted to see. How was this possible? Then how was he able to do it? The old monk was stunned. He asked, "You were willing to cut your flesh to feed the eagle and sacrificed your body to sustain the tiger. This was a journey to compassion, but why is there no compassion in you?" Xiaoji calmly replied, "Because I had none to begin with." "Are you not willing to feed the eagle with your flesh? Then who will feed me?" "But you did it." Xiaoji concluded, "When I was close to death, I understood the meaning of life. I survived with the belief that even if I had died, I would return from the netherworld." After saying this, Xiaoji suddenly exuded a grand Buddhist aura. Although he had not meant to use it, the dhyana of the present protected him from the mental onslaught that had occurred earlier. If it had not been activated, he would not have passed the trial. The moment this happened, the old monk remarked in horror, "But you have been enlightened. How did you do that?" Xiaoji did not reply, but asked in return, "Is the trial over?" The old monk was silent for a while, after which he replied, "It is over. But I would like to ask, if you knew yourself and saw that it was not to turn back to shore, what did you see?" "I saw the Buddha smiling as he held a flower, but that is not who I am." "Then who are you?" "If I fancy it, I would have no flowers bloom at all." "You are a demon of the Buddha. Then will you still lend me the sutra?" Yes. Chapter 6. Vegetarian Food. Xia Ji wasted no time loitering about after solving the challenge and descended the mountain straight away. Eunuch Mei came forth and asked, "Seventh Imperial Prince, have you concluded the game? Let us return. His Majesty has instructed that we must return to the palace before nightfall. Let's not be late." He, if the 7th Imperial Prince refuses to talk to me, I suppose I won't ask either. Eunuch Mei smiled darkly, then followed the prince who was still under house arrest to the 5th summit. Monks were already waiting with the past Dipankara Sutra at the 5th summit when they arrived. The scriptures were stored in a chest adorned with 7 jewels: gold, silver, aquamarine, clear quartz, tridacna stone, rubies, and mother-of-pearl. Eunuch Mei smiled thoughtfully as he commended, "So His Highness has managed to solve the chess game." "Brilliant, how brilliant, this is an absolute eye-opener." Accepting the scripture, Xia Ji ignored him and walked ahead on his own. Eunuch Mei did not continue speaking and walked behind the prince nonchalantly until the pair reached the foot of Mount Meru. Then, Eunuch Mei boarded the carriage and took the reins in his hands, driving the imperial prince back to the depths of the palace, where he resumed his house arrest like before. The rosy haze hanging over the palace was as red as fresh blood. In a flash, it was morning again, then afternoon, then night. The 9th imperial princess seemed to know that her brother had gotten what he set out to acquire, so she came to visit him. When she approached the courtyard door, she heard the chanting of Buddhist sutras, which made her stop in her tracks. When the chanting eventually ended, she pushed open the door and walked in with a lunchbox in hand. She said with a smile, "Congratulations, brother, for solving the game and earning access to the archives of Lane Temple. Everyone in the palace is talking about it now, and all I can say is that you must have a deep connection with Buddha." Watching her brother basking in this new limelight, Xia Xiaosu felt a sense of pride as well. Although her brother was obsessed with Buddhist scriptures and was confined in a small chamber, he was still able to gain recognition and make a name for himself through his scriptures. It was enough. Although the reputation he earned was not as impressive as the heir apparent gaining control of the entire military, or the 3rd imperial prince earning the favor of the great scholars, or even of the 5th imperial prince winning the respect of the Black Dam and the rest of the people, at least others would no longer utter "useless" when the house-arrested 7th imperial prince was brought up in conversation. Xia Ji smiled when he saw his sister's genuine happiness on his behalf. He opened the lunchbox and saw that it was filled with vegetarian cuisine, and an inspectional sniff told him that there was no meat at all. Placing a hand on it, he realized that there was not even Tibetan wine in it. He looked at Xia Xiaosu, a doubtful look in his eyes. The imperial princess explained, "It was imperial concubine Wan who insisted it is prepared this way. Imperial concubine Wan is the 3rd imperial prince's mother. Why should I need her to handle my meals?" Xia Xiaosu thought for a few moments before saying, "Imperial concubine is very loved by the imperial emperor. She is also very gentle and virtuous in front of outsiders, never once stepping out of line." She shed tears and said it was a true tragedy that the birth mothers of my brothers and sisters had died early and there was no one to look after them in the palace. She had been negligent in the past, and she blamed herself for that. She stated that she will be treating my siblings as her own in the future, and the imperial emperor has agreed to it. The great scholars thought this to be a wonderful move, saying that it is in line with the teachings of Confucianism. Imperial concubine Wan said she could not bear to see me, an imperial princess, cooking for myself and working so hard. So, she ordered the chefs to prepare personal meals for the imperial prince every day. So they prepared vegetarian food. Xia Xiaosu nodded and added, "You went to play a game of chess yesterday and we received the news from the abbot at Lane Temple this morning. They said that your heart was composed of 7 parts of the Buddha and 3 parts of the devil. And that was why you could solve the pearl in the sea." The corners of Xia Ji's lips twitched upward. The abbot was certainly diligent in relaying messages this time, but who was he relaying them to? It seemed like the monks who had completed their time at the monastery were not monks as well. However, his calm expression did not falter, because he was not overly surprised at what had happened, so he did not practice much Rudraksha meditation during his time at Mount Meru. Although he had harbored some expectations that the monks had left their birth home for real and had rejected the world for the monastic life, in the end, they were nothing more than expectations. Oblivious to the change in her brother's mood, Xia Xiaosu went on, "Imperial concubine Wan said that it's these 3 parts of the devil that's obstructing your religious practices. For you to have a brighter future on the path of Buddhism, she specially requested the chef to prepare vegetarian food from now on to purge the demonic powers inside you. When the imperial emperor heard of this, he even complimented her. After hearing the story from his sister, Xia Ji laughed out loud. Then, he took the vegetarian food, which did not contain even a drop of animal grease, and started eating, relishing the meal. Martial artists needed meat to keep their bones and muscles strong. Those who plotted needed a ruthless heart to fight every inch of the way. Without the protein, he would lose all of his powers. That would strip him of any opportunities he had. He shifted his gaze sideways to peer out the window, where he could clearly see bits of the bustling city, parts of the chambers hidden deep within the palace, and the fact that he had no more friends in this world. The only person he had left was the 9th imperial princess who his mother had given birth to. The monks had also been converted. Imperial concubine Wan wanted to control him. The imperial emperor was not treating him well either. Even his siblings had daggers hidden behind their smiles. Tn, this idiom means to have friendly manners belying hypocritical intentions. As Xia Ji ate the vegetarian meal, the blurred, heavy silhouettes in the sky morphed into an image of the 5 summits and crashed toward him, trapping him within the depths of the archive chamber. He would never be able to change. Unless he died, he would never be able to get out of this situation. When he finished, Xia Xiaosu put away the empty dishes. The naive princess had obviously not seen through his plans and thought that her brother was solely devoted to the Buddha. Becoming vegetarian was a sign of leaving the secular world, and meant that he was retreating from the treacherous struggle for power. This was obviously something good, so she smiled as she said, "If there is anything else you want, feel free to tell me. No one will dare to mess with me now." Who would dare to get on the bad side of a princess who was going to be married to the Tujue in 3 months? She was ready to enter hell. Her brother could go to the land of Buddha too. What was the land of Buddha like? She did not know. Yet, even if it was all right, it was set in stone. So be it. It had been decided by God. And never by themselves. Looking at the clean bowl, Xia Xiaosu asked curiously, "Brother, do you like vegetarian food?" Xia Ji smiled warmly. "Yes, I do." He simply loved it. The actions taken by those in the palace had almost severed any expressions of love. Though there was one thing. Although the abbot was enthusiastic, his verdict was incorrect. 7 parts of the Buddha, and 3 parts of the devil. Wrong. It should be 10 parts of the devil. The 9th imperial princess pushed the door of the chamber open, then closed it gently behind her when she left. The last ray of light grew narrower and narrower as the door shut. When it had faded completely, he, the 7th imperial prince of the Dashang dynasty, flipped open the past Dipankara Sutra. 1 page at a time. He recited 1 word at a time. Even when eunuch Mei, who was sitting outside the chamber, began yawning, he still recited. Eunuch Mei shook his head mockingly. "I thought that there would be something special about him after he cracked the code of the pearl in the sea, yet he's still the same old loser. I supposed it's to be expected, all he knows is the basics, so what if he has the heart of the devil and the personality of the Buddha? It is all but a joke, ha ha ha." Taking a few more steps, he lamented, "There's also some good in reciting the sutras. If he goes to a temple and becomes a monk, he can at least live on. Better to live without dignity than to die." The palace gradually grew silent. The imperial city became doused in moonlight. Archive chamber. Pa. The pages closed. Closing his eyes, Xia Ji felt the subtle stirrings within his heart, as well as the manifestation of the 5th skill bead between his eyebrows, Dhyana of the past. The skill bead broke and the gold liquid became one with him, taking him on a journey to realize the power and meditative mind of Buddha. A little over half an hour later, he had already mastered the 9th level of Dhyana of the past. If the Dhyana of the present inclined toward exchanging one's own heart with the land and the sky, and focused more on the fusion between the naturality of the land and sky. Then, the meaning behind the Dhyana of the past was, when the Nagapushpa flower blooms, everything will be as clear as day, and the light serves as guidance. This Dhyana was more unique than the others and could be achieved through simple actions. When the snow or the wind stopped, it would affect its surroundings, causing a different pattern to form within nature. The Dhyana followed after the light. To put it bluntly, it was an attack on one's spirit. as well as a spiritual restraint. Chapter 7. Prayer Beads. Xia Ji slept the night away in the dark chamber. The next morning, he heard the reverent shouts of guards outside the door, paying respects to the honorable imperial concubine Wan. The noise grew gradually louder as it approached until the doors to the archive chamber were abruptly thrown open. A beautiful concubine walked in. Her eyes were soft and gentle, and she was not dressed flamboyantly. There was a tear mole under her left eye, which consolidated the air of compassion about her. This was Imperial Concubine Wan, the concubine who had recently captured the Imperial Emperor's heart, and who was also the birth mother of the third Imperial Prince. Imperial Concubine Wan entered the room and waved her head at the guards in dismissal. "You may leave now." The eunuch and guards hastily took their leave and withdrew to the courtyard, keeping watch from a distance. Xia Ji smoothed his shirt, which was the color of the moon, as he saluted. "My respects to Imperial Concubine Wan." The gorgeous woman took a quick look at the young man. There was a slight resemblance between his eyebrows and the woman's, and a hint of disgust flashed within her gaze. However, the expression disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, and she brushed it aside to say, "The Imperial Emperor has passed custody of you and the 9th Imperial Princess to me, so you will address me as Imperial Mother Concubine." The two stared at each other silently. The corner of Imperial Concubine Wan's lip curled slightly. "Why aren't you kneeling before your Imperial Mother Concubine?" Xia Ji replied, "I have bad knees from the constant meditation in this tiny chamber and am unfortunately unable to kneel." "Yet you were able to climb Mount Meru barefoot." Imperial Concubine Wan let out a cold laugh. "If you are destined to become the next Buddha, I can help you achieve that. However, even the Buddha has a mother and needs to abide by filial piety." "I am your mother." Xia Ji retorted, "Well, dare I ask, Honorable Imperial Concubine Wan, who was the one who suggested marrying the 9th Imperial Princess to Tujue?" Imperial Concubine Wan gave a start before she laughed loudly. Sarcastically, she said, "You've got some wisdom to be able to see through this. It seems it was no coincidence that you were able to train your meditative mind and crack the code of the pearl in the sea. You have the wisdom to see through anything and everything, but not the wisdom to remain silent. You would have been wise to keep your mouth shut. Opening your mouth is just a fruitless attempt of trying to be clever. The most pathetic people in the world are those who pretend to be smarter than they are." Xia Ji did not show any anger. His expression was as level and calm as always. He just wanted to make sure that they had different intentions in mind. He flipped one of the Buddhist scriptures open, completely ignoring the Imperial Concubine in front of him. The Imperial Concubine gave him a cold, sweeping glance as she whispered, "So it's true, the 3 parts of the devil within you. It seems like eating vegetarian food has not rid the demonic powers within you." With that, she left the chamber with a flourish of her sleeves. As she walked away, the sounds of devoted chanting of Buddhist sutras rang out from behind her. There is no suffering, no accumulating, no extinction, and no way, and no understanding and no attaining. Because nothing is attained, the Bodhisattva through reliance on Prajnaparamita is unimpeded in his mind. Because there is no impediment, he is not afraid. Imperial Concubine Wan chuckled coolly, an expression of revulsion appearing on her face as her footsteps sped up. Xia Ji chanted until the evening, and the food that was delivered to him that day was even more tasteless than before. Before this, at least vegetarian oil was still used. Now, everything had just been blanched in water, with no flavorings or spices added. There was simply no flavor to speak of. The prince ate quietly and thanked the servant when he was done. The servant hastily paid her respects, thinking about how gentle this prince was compared to the rest of the royal family, before hurrying off. The 9th Imperial Princess arrived shortly after the servant left. She seemed to be in a good mood, a really good mood. Xia Ji immediately sensed her suppressed joy and asked, "Xiaosu, did something good happen?" Xiaosu asked curiously, "How did you know, brother?" "It's written all over your eyes." Xiaosu batted her eyelids and leaned closer. "Brother, don't tell anyone." Xia Ji laughed uproariously as he ruffled his sister's hair. "The imperial city is large, but who could I possibly tell?" Xiaosu leaned forward and whispered, "Here's what happened. I went to Lane Temple today to pray and ask for blessings when I came across a little fox with its legs caught in a trap in the mountains. It was bleeding profusely and seemed to be in a lot of pain. So, I helped free it from the trap and applied medicine to the wound and bandaged it. The little fox was really smart. It rubbed itself against my legs a few times before leaving, reluctantly, I think. For some reason, I'm just so happy to see that it could be saved and returned to the forest. Immersed in her memories, Xia Xiaosu smiled as she recounted the incident. Xia Ji smiled too. His little sister was still a 16-year-old maiden. Although she had lived in the depths of the palace for a long time, she still had a kind heart. Or maybe it was precisely because she was like a bird trapped in a cage that she was able to empathize with the happiness of the little fox when she returned its freedom to it. In the following days, the vegetarian food became even blander, with no oil or salt used. To ensure that the 7th imperial prince did not become distracted from his practice, even the 9th imperial princess was forbidden from bringing meat or alcohol into the archive chamber. Xia Ji did not lose his patience. He had already been waiting for 2 years. If he wanted to escape that tiny chamber, it was natural that he would have to wait for a long time. Only time would decide his fate. As he waited for the fated time to arrive, he was also waiting for his destiny to be decided. If his destiny was to be uneventful and the world was to be in turmoil, he would take Xiaosu and leave after a month and a half. For now, the right moment had yet to arrive, but he had already recited all the sutras he could find and had obtained all the skill beads he could. Now, there was nothing he could do except recite them over and over again. So, he asked for a block of agar wood as well as a carving knife. He had vivid memories from the chess game on the 9th summit of Mount Meru. The chessboard with its spiritual power was so powerful, it could cause people to see illusions that were sufficiently realistic. Even though he had the 9th level of the Diana of the present, it did not save him from being sucked in as well, so anyone else would have stood even less of a chance. Since he had the 9th layer of both the Diana of the present and the Diana of the past, why not try melding the combination of those energies into the tip of a knife and infusing it within a prayer bead? So, before dawn, he had already woken up. Sitting in the dark, he closed his eyes as he held the carving knife and chipped away slowly at the block of agar wood. His hands were slender, yet fragile. A bright, glowing sun shone from the gap between Xia Ji's hand and the knife, but he suppressed it so that the glow and heat from the sun were limited only to the tip of the knife. This was part of the 9 Suns of the Heart Sutra, which he had extracted from the Diamond Sutra. The 9 suns were based on the theory of the 5 elements and 9 acupuncture points where inner vitality was stored, namely the base of the heart, the dantian, the stomach, the bladder, the intestines, the hands, the spine, the lungs, and the crown of the head. When he successfully mastered each acupuncture point, a sun would be produced. When all 9 points had been mastered, he would have 9 independent suns. The body was like the earth, the organs were the mountains and forests, and the 9 suns hung in the sky. From then on, he would no longer fall ill naturally, his stream of inner vitality like a never-ending river. In the darkness, the tip of the knife was sizzling hot and glittering as it traveled through the agar wood like it was paper. Not speeding up or slowing down. Xia Ji's wrist worked without rest, and soon he had created 18 round prayer beads. Uncarved, they were just wooden beads. The 18 of them represented the 6 Indriyas, the 6 gunas, and the 6 parijnanas. Then he picked up the first wooden bead, stowing away the blazing sun in his palm and tossing aside the carving knife he was holding. He put a finger on the wooden bead, the immensity of the Buddha's mind collected at his fingertips. The land and sky shall connect in my heart, and my heart shall connect to the land and sky. He placed the tip of his finger upon the wooden bead. He did not apply much pressure, nor did he even carve it, but the wooden bead changed on its own until the outer layer of the wooden bead was wrapped in a layer of gold plasma that was shifting visibly, as if a dragon was swimming inside it. The wood caved in, and the plasma flowed freely until it formed the shape of a swastika. Moles beneath the eyes are called tear moles and signifies suffering and bitterness in life. Chapter 8. Fox Spirit. 1 hour later. Xia Ji had finished carving all 18 prayer beads. As he loosened his right hand, the 18 prayer beads floated into the air, rotating counterclockwise above his palm. As the beads connected, they each projected an image of a swastika. The 18 layers overlapped on top of each other, glowing with bright golden color and emanating power. The power that was contained within was restless and begging to be let loose, but Xia Ji suppressed it. The intensity of the energy may not have been as powerful as directly combining inner vitality and stamina, but just being able to transfer these powers to a block of agar wood was already a pleasant surprise. However, the energy spent could not be replenished by using inner vitality. After carving 18 prayer beads in succession, Xiaji could not prevent himself from feeling drained. He sat motionless for a while before closing his palm. The gold swastika disappeared and the prayer beads fell. The flowing golden plasma also disappeared as he gathered everything into his palm. Xiaji turned his head. The light of the dawn was shining through the windows and the footsteps of the servant who was in charge of delivering meals could be heard approaching. A few moments later, the door opened. The servant entered with a lunchbox in hand. It was a bowl of plain porridge and a handful of blanched vegetables. Even the flavored side dishes were gone. Xiaji knew that this was Imperial concubine Wan's way of showing her care. He finished his tasteless breakfast calmly under the admiring eyes of the servant. After that, Xiaji requested more agar wood. As an imperial prince, no one would prevent him from carving prayer beads from wood. It was the same concept as an admiral going down into the fields. He was showing that he had no interest in the fight for power. Soon, a few large blocks of agar wood were delivered to the archive chamber. Thus, Xiaji recited sutras in the day, and when night fell, he used the Zen method to carve prayer beads. Aside from his abilities, these prayer beads were also cards that he could play. Although he had not previously tested out siphoning his powers and storing them in a prayer bead, Xiaji could feel the immense power within the prayer beads. The intensity of the power increased along with the number of prayer beads. Just when he had carved another 20 or so prayer beads, someone knocked at the door. Knock knock knock. A smile appeared on Xiaji's face. He knew who had come to visit. Come in. Creak. The door opened. A cute face poked its way in. The 9th Imperial Princess joyfully ran to her brother's side as she called out, "Brother." Xiaji patted the Imperial Princess's long, silky hair and smiled. Did something good happen again? The Imperial Princess leaned close to him as she whispered, "I went to pray for blessings for you today, and I met the little fox again. The little fox's injured paw is already half healed, and it ran up to me to tug on the edge of my skirt. It looked like it wanted to bring me somewhere, so I followed it. The guard was worried for my safety and wanted to come along, but the minute he started following us, the little fox would stop moving, so I ordered the guard to stop following." Xiaji's expression shifted slightly. Were foxes that clever? Xia Xiaosu went on, "The little fox brought me to a village in the mountains, and there was a gorgeous young girl there. When the girl saw that the fox brought me there, she came over to chat. Her name's Hu Ling, and she's been living in the mountains with the foxes for company for years now. All the foxes already have some form of spiritual enlightenment, but they don't know how to read. Hu Ling doesn't know many words herself, so she hoped that I could teach them how to read. I was scared, but curious at the same time. But I gave in when I saw how Hu Ling was looking expectantly at me, as well as the other foxes, who seemed to understand what was happening and were staring at me with pleading eyes. I figured that teaching them a few words wouldn't be too much trouble, so I agreed to teach them. After teaching a little bit about the 3 character classics, the foxes were all scratching their heads and ears like they were confused. I was a little happy and a little confused at the same time. I wondered if they could understand what I was talking about at all. Ms. Hu Ling was very happy too. She treated me to all sorts of fruits that could only be found in the mountains, and talked about how the foxes could imitate humans and understand mannerisms and honor, as well as the difference between kindness and malevolence, and could even behave courteously. On top of that, they had long stopped eating raw meat, human flesh even more so, and now had a diet mostly of Indian gooseberries. Since it was still early, Ms. Hu Ling took me to a cave in the village, which was filled with bookshelves. She said that the books on the shelves were all out-of-print volumes, and as a thank you, she would let me borrow a copy. I was just going to quickly leaf through them, but the moment I got a good look, I never wanted to leave. There were books that we only heard of in legends before and even some hidden archives about techniques. I browsed for a long time and I picked out a book. "Brother, why don't you guess what book it is?" Xiaji did not respond. Raising a hand, he placed it gently on top of his little sister's brow. Gentle energy flowed through his fingers into the Imperial Princess's skin, but he did not detect the presence of any malicious spirits after a short examination. He was already on the 9th level of 2 Zen methods and had immensely strong spiritual strength. He did not even need to probe deliberately. Even if he were lying down and fast asleep, he would still be able to detect the presence of malicious spirits. However, even the brief scan revealed nothing unusual. Could it be that the fox spirits had no ill intent? Xia Xiaosu carefully took out an ancient scripture. There were scorch marks at the beginning and end of the text, but the overall content was complete and nothing was missing. There were 2 words inscribed onto the cover of the scripture, Future Maitreya. The word, Sutra, had been destroyed in the burning. Future Maitreya Sutra. This scripture was said to be one of 3 secret collections of the Lane Temple from hundreds of years ago and was also the most important scripture, but it had been destroyed during the raid of the Great Lane Temple when the rebellion was ongoing. As the Shang dynasty rose, the smaller Lane Temple was built near the imperial city, which led to the existence of the temple on Mount Meru today. Xia Ji knew that Lane Temple housed the present Rudraksh Sutra as well as the past Dipankara Sutra, but he was confident that it did not have the future Maitreya Sutra. The loss of the future Maitreya Sutra was something that anyone who had dabbled in Buddhism literature would know about, and it was the collective regret of all Buddhists. Upon seeing it, Xia Ji rejoiced in his heart. His sister was a lucky charm, to be able to encounter such a mysterious thing. It was nothing less than treasure falling from the sky. The 3 secret collections of the past, present, and future were clearly connected, and now that he had his hands on this long-lost scripture, he could finally understand their secrets. Xia Xiaosu felt genuinely happy when she saw Xia Ji break into an unmistakable smile. She was glad that she was able to do a little something for her brother before she left for Tujue. Flicking through a few pages, Xia Ji felt a mysterious power rush through him. This convinced him that the book was real. Even more curious now, he peeled his eyes away from it and asked, Xiaosu, you've met a fox spirit. The girl, Hu Ling, was probably a shape-shifting fox spirit. Shapeshifters were not uncommon in Buddhist scriptures. There were even folk tales of monks and Taoist priests who shape-shifted to defeat monsters. Xia Xiaosu was not clueless. I guessed that she was a fox spirit as well. Xia Ji flicked his sister on the forehead. Spirits are different from humans. You knew that and you still went along. Xia Xiaosu rubbed her head as she stuck out her tongue. I treated them kindly, and they treated me with kindness in turn. I taught them about the rituals behind being kind as well as being mean, and they lent me books. We exchanged courtesies, just like how 2 proper gentlemen would do. I would say that they're better than many people inside the palace. Brother, I've only got 2 months left in the imperial capital, so let me roam about and explore a little. There are so many restrictions within the palace already, please let me be. Xia Ji looked relieved, and after a moment of thinking, he said softly, Xiaosu, the next time you meet Hu Ling, ask her, what does she want? As he spoke, he took the prayer beads and counted out 14 of them. Stringing them into a bracelet, he passed it to her. Wear this. If you're in danger, concentrate, then put these prayer beads to your brow. Receiving the bracelet, Xia Xiaosu rolled up her sleeve and slid it onto her wrist, not thinking much about it. Her brother was a pious Buddhist, so these prayer beads were probably to soothe him psychologically more than anything. Whatever her brother said, she would follow without question. Midnight. All was silent. A horse came galloping over from the west, the sounds of its hooves breaking the tranquility as its rider rushed to the west gate of the imperial city and shouted, "Urgent report from the front lines, open the city gate immediately." The city guard raised their torches and went over to the edge of the walls. Looking down, they were greeted by the sight of a face full of fear. Waving the predetermined signal, the communicator troop continued shouting, "Urgent report from the front lines, open the city gate immediately." His voice was trembling and rushed, and his anxiety was evident. The city guard stared for a moment before hurriedly saying, "Open the gates." "Yes, sir." The 2 guards ran down from the castle head in a hurry. There was a screeching sound. The gates were opened. And dreadful news was received. Chapter 9. Golden Qilin in the Pond. Da da da. The sound of galloping horse hooves from the front lines dashed into the imperial capital, and reports from the battle 3,000 miles away entered the palace. However, to the rest of the people, it was but a normal winter night, because they were not made aware of this war report. The next day, the palace was unusually noisy. The guards were particularly fidgety and did not stay still, and the sounds of items being moved were incessant. By mid-afternoon, the bronze carriages left the palace one by one, seemingly in a great hurry. Xiaji walked to the courtyard of the archive chamber and looked upward. It was late winter. In December, the winds and clouds were changing rapidly, and everyone's fate was something only time could tell. He spread out his fingers and a fresh snowflake landed on his palm, but it did not melt. With a wave of his hand, the snowflake drifted away again. He had finished reading the Future Maitreya Sutra last night and had returned the scripture to Xiaosu this morning. Xiaosu then returned to the mountains. The golden skill bead, Diana of the future, had reacted with the skill beads, Diana of the past, and Diana of the present. The three had combined to form a red skill bead, Trailokia Diana. Naturally, he had immediately attained the 9th level of this Diana. Xiaji had yet to grasp the nature of the red skill bead, but he at least knew that it was not weak. The reason being that he could already feel a qualitative transformation within his spirituality. He had reached a whole new level, one that he could never have attained by using the Diana of the past, present, or future individually. It would not be an exaggeration to say that his spirituality felt like that of the Buddha when he descended into the mortal world. Standing beneath the strip of sky that was the size of a palm, 3 giant images of Buddha appeared around him. The images showed them standing, then bowing in respect to him. They appeared only for an instant, immediately fading back to nothingness. Xiaji bowed his head slightly in return. Eunuch Mei barged in with an imperial edict in hand, then bellowed, "Xiaji, 7th Imperial Prince, please receive this decree." He shot a peculiar look at the prince who was standing alone in the courtyard. The prince seemed to be slightly odd today, but Eunuch Mei did not give it much thought and merely repeated urgently, "Please receive this decree." Without bowing or kneeling, Xiaji turned around, fixed the men with a cool look, and said nonchalantly, "Declare it." Eunuch Mei grunted at the prince's attitude but did not retort as he unfurled the imperial edict and recited, "The edict proclaims that the enemy has invaded the central plain. The 7th Imperial Prince, Xiaji, is hereby bestowed the title of War Admiral to defend the imperial city against the foreigners. Respect this." Eunuch Mei expected the prince to be ecstatic after he relayed the message, but he did not see any reaction. Xiaji asked shortly, "Where is the imperial emperor?" Eunuch Mei answered, "Naturally, the imperial emperor would not stay in an endangered city." Xiaji asked again, "What about the heir apparent?" Eunuch Mei did not have anything to fear as the imperial emperor had already sent all the imperial relatives who were important to him out of the imperial capital. That included the imperial empress, imperial concubine Wan, the 3rd imperial prince, the 5th imperial prince, and the princesses. They should have met up with the 50,000 troops and were heading south by now. He declared without hesitation, "The heir apparent has died in the war." Xiaji pressed, "Where are the 100,000 elites under the heir apparent?" Eunuch Mei had nothing to lose. He was not afraid to let the 7th imperial prince know that he was nothing more than a scapegoat now. He stated blandly, "They're all dead." "How did they die?" Eunuch Mei explained, "The enemy sent over 3,000 frost giants on a sneak attack when it snowed last night. That was when the heir apparent perished in battle." Ha 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 ha. Xiaji tilted his head and laughed out loud. What happened from now on was all decided by destiny. It seemed that his destiny was not to be uneventful either. Besides, when he saw Xiaosu again, he could score one over her and gloat to her, "See, you said that the heir apparent took 100,000 troops to war against the enemy. They had the finest armor and immense power. Even the ministers were unanimously optimistic that an immortal achievement would make its way into the history books. Now look what happened, and you say that you're not. Tainted milk." Thinking of Xia Xiaosu, he questioned again. "Where is the 9th imperial princess?" Eunuch Mei replied, "To be honest, the steward is waiting for the 9th imperial princess. The minute she returns, she'll be brought down south to catch up with the rest of our troops. After all, the 9th imperial princess will be married to Tujue." Xiaji asked, "What about my authority seal and tiger tally?" Eunuch Mei screeched in laughter. "The steward thought that the 7th imperial prince would have no use for them, so he has taken them for safekeeping. The imperial prince needs to keep guard on the city gate to preserve the dignity of the Dashang dynasty, and what the 7th imperial prince needs to do is extremely easy." Xiaji gave a shout of laughter and snapped, "How easy is it?" Eunuch Mei said, "All you need to do is stand on the city walls and boost everyone's morale, that's it." Xiaji said, "In that case, take me to the steward first." Eunuch Mei gave another hoot of laughter and said, I believe that the 7th Imperial Prince is still not clear of the situation at hand. Xia Ji smiled and asked, what situation? Eunuch Mei was not shameless enough to say, you are a scapegoat to the prince. In the end, they were all members of the palace and had to be mindful of what was said to others. He did not say anything else as he dragged the prince along with a scornful look on his face. The naive prince might fancy himself a legitimate war admiral if the elderman did not show him what he had up his sleeve. Eunuch Mei's grip, driven by several cold bursts of power, caused a bluish hue to appear on his knuckles, which carried an even more insidious force within it. The moment he latched onto the prince, the toxic inner vitality would seep into his body, and cause him so much pain he would wish he was dead. When that happened, the 7th Imperial Prince would obey him and be compliant. However, Eunuch Mei was confused. He had been in close contact with the 7th Imperial Prince for 2 years, and the youngster was nothing a loser who took things as they came and recited Buddhist sutras, yet today, the prince was a bit strange. He could not even explain the anomaly. Yet, nothing happened. His clutch, which contained the cold and toxic inner vitality, had found its way onto the 7th Imperial Prince's shoulder joint. With this clasp, the malevolent inner vitality found an outlet and immediately made its way into the boy's body. If things went as they should, the prince should be screaming out in agony at the next second. However, Eunuch Mei did not hear any such sounds. He smiled darkly in response. I've been with you for 2 years, but I never would have guessed that you were so tough. This was the first time Xia Ji fought someone since he obtained his powers. After experiencing the true power of one of the experts of the palace, he did a mental assessment. Then, a beam of light appeared on his shoulder joint, and a burst of burning inner vitality traveled straight along with the 5 fingers that were holding onto his shoulder. Eunuch Mei's 5 fingers abruptly expanded several times in size, like a thin tube under the strain of a large amount of water gushing through it. Bang, 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 bang. The majestic inner vitality of the 9 suns expelled the icy vitality and rushed through Eunuch Mei's veins. Then, it burst through the man's blood vessels, skin, and bone of his hand. Eunuch Mei felt nothing but excruciating pain coursing through his body. Then, when he looked at his right hand, he saw that it had been blown to pieces and was now a bloody mess of flesh. Screaming miserably, his eyes widened in disbelief. The pain he felt, mixed with the shock of the unexpected turn of events, caused him to forget what he should do next. Instinctively, he knelt onto the ground. When he raised his head, he saw the 7th Imperial Prince, who he had always dismissed as a loser, staring down from above him. The prince's face had become unrecognizable. The former docility in his eyes had vanished, and when he raised his left and right hands, the 9 blazing suns were strung together in a row. The sun was shining so brightly and with such power that Eunuch Mei felt unable to breathe. The eunuch was stunned, unable to even react. Suddenly, a verse from a poem appeared in his head. The golden qilin in the pond turns into a dragon when the storm rages. Slang in esports that refers to teammates who make things worse than they already are. The qilin is a mythical hoofed chimerical creature known in Chinese and other East Asian cultures, said to appear with the imminent arrival or passing of a sage or illustrious ruler. Chapter 10. Execution. Take me to the steward first. His voice was the same calm tone as usual, but to Eunuch Mei's ears, it sounded completely different. Enduring the pain, Eunuch Mei wrapped his hand several times until he struck the acupuncture point that stopped bleeding. Then, he retrieved a white porcelain bottle from his arms and unstoppered the cap, his hands shaking as he poured some pills in his mouth. Buckets of cold sweat beaded his forehead as he redirected his vitality for the pills to take effect. Xia Ji was not in a hurry either. He returned to the archive chamber and retrieved the 33 remaining prayer beads, threading them together with a black cord before hanging them on his arms along with the imperial decree. These were his handmade little trump cards. With a last look at the place where he had spent more than 2 years of his life, he turned away with finality and never looked back. Eunuch Mei had finished treating his wounds. He was ruthless, cutting off his entire right hand and coating the stump with medicinal power. Now, he was standing on the spot with his face deathly pale, no longer running or fleeing. When he saw Xia Ji, he fell to his knees with a thump and said, "It's my fault for being blind, thinking that a ferocious tiger was just a cat for the past 2 years. I have become convinced after witnessing the might of the 7th Imperial Prince, and I shall take you to the steward at once." Xia Ji said, "Good that you know. Eunuch Mei said respectfully, "The steward is waiting for the 9th Imperial Princess at the front hall. There is a large crowd in the front hall, as well as a great number of guards. Would the prince like to wait for a while?" Xia Ji eyed him curiously. The eunuch seemed to be quite the tolerant man himself. He had just had one of his hands destroyed, and he had suddenly turned over a new leaf and was being considerate. Eunuch Mei explained, "I am also one of the people who have been left behind to die in the imperial city. Those who are in power have already left with the imperial emperor. Besides, if I had gained power and authority, I wouldn't have been tasked to keep an eye on you, would I? I've been cast away, but I don't want to be in such a state. Although I've lost a hand, I've managed to see for myself what kind of person the 7th Imperial Prince truly is." Xia Ji said curtly, "Lead the way. Are we leaving now? There's a crowd at the front hall. So we can't go to crowded places." "Well." Eunuch Mei, who had been arrogant and dominating before, was quickly adjusting his attitude toward the person standing in front of him. No one knew the horror of this one as clearly as he did. The young man had been sitting and reciting sutras for 2 years. No one would have thought that he would showcase his prowess during these stormy times. His insane display of patience proved that he was at least someone with an ambitious heart. Now that the world was descending into chaos, why should Eunuch Mei follow if not this person? The front hall of the palace used to be the place where hundreds of officials reported their duties. Now, it was as silent as a graveyard. The key figures within the officials had all fled along with the imperial emperor. As for the rest who had not received the news that the heir apparent had died in battle and the 100,000 troops had vanished into thin air, they knew enough to watch the wind and set the helm as well. This idiom means to be flexible and take advantage of the situation. They would naturally follow suit and quietly leave with their families in tow once they saw all the key figures had left. To get out of the city successfully, they would even hide the truth from others. However, those who had escaped were either prepared to abandon their status as an official, or they were confident they could get by with their connections. Otherwise, for an imperial officer to leave the imperial capital during a war, that was punishable by death. The sun had set early, and the snow fell even harder. The steward, along with 300 guards, waited for the 9th Imperial Princess at the door of the palace. The 9th princess's hand had been promised in marriage to the Tujue nation. If she was gone, another princess would have to take her place, but who would be willing to do that? No one. When the princess returned, the steward would have his trusted chief of guards accompany the princess to catch up with the imperial emperor. Then, with tiger tally and authority seal in hand, he would escort the scapegoat, who had been abandoned by the royal family, to the front of the city to guard it in a last stand. When it was confirmed that the 7th Imperial Prince had died in battle and the imperial family's image had been preserved, he could then utilize his skills to make a hasty retreat as quickly as possible. The imperial family of the Dashang dynasty could not afford to be branded with the shame of abandoning the imperial capital and fleeing. The 7th Imperial Prince was to be their fig leaf. The frost giants were the so-called soldiers from the enemy's side. They were at least 4 to 5 meters tall, unfathomably strong, and invincible in the snowy weather. Their armor was made of frost and could block attacks from any knife or spear. Even if they did get hurt, they would recover in a short amount of time, and due to the heavy snowstorm, their tracks would be concealed. They were a bunch of monsters blessed by the snow and ice. These giants were clearly out of the realm of normal combat considerations. In fact, they had vanished for a long time, and no one knew where the enemy had procured these 3,000 frost giants. The heir apparent had succumbed to an ambush even with a troop of 100,000 people by his side. No one could fault him, however. After all, no one would have imagined that the enemy would ambush them in the middle of the night with frost giants. As the steward waited patiently, the unmistakable sound of footsteps came from the palace square behind him. His soft face scrunched up. To prevent information from leaking out of the palace, the lower servants and eunuchs, as well as the unpopular concubines, had been locked up with guards watching over every place. So, who else could possibly be coming? As the steward turned his head, he saw the prince approaching him in the snow. He took a look at Eunuch Mei, who was standing beside the prince, and his brows immediately knotted themselves together. "Eunuch Mei, what happened to your right hand?" Eunuch Mei did not speak and kept his head down as he stopped in his tracks. Xia Ji continued striding forward. When the two men were 5 feet apart, Xia Ji stopped and used his left hand to retrieve the imperial decree from his arms. Pulling it open, he barked loudly to the steward, "Read it." The steward was momentarily stunned, then could not resist laughing out loud. Did the 7th Imperial Prince lose his mind? Xia Ji threw the imperial decree behind him, and Eunuch Mei hurriedly caught it with his left hand. "Read it." Eunuch Mei gave a start. What did the new monarch mean? Xia Ji demanded, "Read it loudly." Eunuch Mei nodded. Although he was weak, he could still enunciate words, so he began, "The edict proclaims that." Xia Ji interrupted him. "Louder." Bearing the immense pain he was in, Eunuch Mei began reciting with all his might, "The edict proclaims that the enemy has invaded the central plain. The 7th Imperial Prince, Xia Ji, is hereby bestowed the title of War Admiral to defend the imperial city against the foreigners. Respect this." His sharp, hoarse voice enveloped at least half of the palace, enabling everyone to hear him clearly, which naturally included the steward. The imperial city was deathly quiet in the snow. Xia Ji took 2 steps forward and looked the steward straight in the eye as he said calmly, "Well, aren't you going to return the tiger tally and authority seal to me?" Weighing the situation at hand, the steward did not know what tricks the 7th Imperial Prince had prepared up his sleeve. Smiling coldly, he said, "Your humble servant will be taking care of your tiger tally and authority seal for you. As the War Admiral, all you have to do is stand guard and protect the imperial capital. Please notify us if there is anything you need, and we will stamp the seal for you." As he finished speaking, he felt the ground shudder violently. Thundering sounds could be heard reverberating from the ground. He then saw a crimson shadow fleeting forward at the speed of light. "For keeping a tiger tally to yourself and disobeying orders, execution." A voice as booming as thunder came forth. The steward's eyes glazed over the prince. He had never thought that the 7th Imperial Prince would have such hidden strength, not giving anything away until the moment he stepped away from the archive chambers. However, as one of the Imperial Emperor's closest guards, the steward had impressive martial arts skills as well, and Eunuch Mei's skills could not be compared to his. Although it was not feasible to kill the prince, the steward decided that he should still be able to break his legs. In the blink of an eye, he waved his hands to produce shadows. Specks of chilling glow radiated from his sleeves. The icy glow seemed mild, but after they escaped the cuffs of his sleeves, they would explode in front of everyone's eyes, splitting into hundreds of little dots, dazzling everyone's eyes with thousands of crisscrossing lines. This was one of the ways that the sacred sunflower scroll instructed on using vigor. Even steel could be penetrated using the embroidery vigor, let alone a human. At that moment, the needles all shot toward the prince's legs. Chapter 11. When the storm rages, the demonic dragon appears. The 7th Imperial Prince was in midair when hundreds of red threads sailed through the air from the sleeve of the steward. There was nowhere to hide. No matter how hard he tried to hide his power, how strong and forceful his inner strength was, the result was predetermined when he was faced with an embroidery vigor capable of piercing through metal. Without doubt, both his legs would be pierced by the embroidery needles, and he would end plunged downward, crumple to the ground, crawl about on his limbs, and wail in pain. That was what the steward thought. It was also what the 300 soldiers were thinking. Amid the overwhelming move, Xia Ji reacted at the same time. He suddenly placed his left hand at the front of this chest, and made a polite gesture with a single hand, indicating courtesy and respect. This movement commanded an atmosphere of serenity around him almost immediately. He had made an extremely rapid movement to intercept the attack, yet his entire body was currently in an extremely still state. Between his polarizing movements of rapidness and stillness, a strange, curious magical charm brewed in the air. It was unfathomable, yet at the same time, commanded the attention of everyone, who were unable to move their gaze away. Right at that moment, a ring expanded around his body. A black flammule shot out from tens of thousands of his pores, creating a 3-foot structure in the form of Vidyaraja around the surface of his body. The Vidyaraja struck a ferocious figure with a fiery flame burning behind its back. Its right hand was holding a bright, blazing sword while its left hand clutched a black silk cord. The sword to slay 3,000 troubles, and the silk cord to imprison 3,000 demons. No knife or spear could pierce through it, no water nor fire could perish it. This was the Aryaklanatha form. The red embroidery threads sailed through the air as they closed in on their target. The surging sound of splitting silk could be heard vibrating through the short distance between them. Following that, Bursts of icy glow could be seen spilling all over Xiaoji's legs. However, those chilling glints only managed to pierce the air 3 feet away from the Vidyaraja form, as if they had rammed into the world's strongest material, leading to a string of sharp ringing sounds, ding, 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 ding. The embroidery needles fell to the ground, every one of them broken. The steward could not believe his eyes. The sacred sunflower scroll had never failed him before, but what was this black Buddha form being projected by the 7th Imperial Prince? How could it manage to defend itself from the embroidery vigor of the sacred sunflower scroll? Xiaoji's movements did not falter. With just a single thought formation in his mind, the Buddha form holding Vidyaraja's sword came slicing down toward the steward's face. Even though the steward was momentarily taken aback, he was, at the end of the day, still the personal attendant of the Imperial Emperor. He had put a stop to numerous assassination attempts on the Imperial Emperor in the past, and when he watched the bright, blazing sword falling upon him, a huge wave of terror that could only be caused by the threat of imminent death surged within him. This fear triggered an untapped potential within him that enhanced his reaction speed by several times. He moved backward swiftly and utilized the phantom speed of the sacred sunflower scroll to forcefully pull himself back in a shadow stance that managed to create a distance of 10 feet between him and the Buddha form. The sword came down hard on the shadow. The shadow was obliterated. The gigantic bright, blazing sword came dangerously close to its target, smashing down right in front of the steward's face. It destroyed his aura shield and left a light, bloody wound vertically from his forehead to the tip of his nose. It was clear that the steward was much more formidable than Eunuch Mei was. Xiaoji landed on the ground and his left hand immediately revealed itself holding 33 prayer beads. The beads overlapped perfectly with the black silk cord. He closed his eyes and focused on his thought, his heart giving into his will, his hand motioning along with his heart. With that, he pushed the prayer beads outward. The beads overlapped with the left hand of Vidyaraja's form, and 2 forms of clear and still augmented shadows appeared in midair. And then, the prayer beads vanished, and so did the silk cord. A dense, bright, golden speck appeared from Xiaoji's left palm. The gold speck grew at a pace that was almost perceptible to the human eye. And grew from a tiny speck to the size of a nail. Continued growing to the size of a palm. Multiple rings spread out in high speed. Until it finally formed a huge, rotating, swift-flying golden swastika. The steward saw the golden swastika flying toward him. He wanted to evade it but his body would not yield to his will as everything was happening too quickly. It was so quick, all he could do was watch the events unfold without being able to react. He was relegated to watch with fear as the golden swastika filled his eyes completely until he was no longer able to see the imperial city, nor any other objects anymore. Bam! The swastika struck the steward's body and golden lights immediately pierced into his body. The steward stood where he was in a daze. He stood until the light evaporated and everything ended. The steward was now kneeling on the ground, a layer of golden light binding him beneath his skin. The slightest movement would trigger the golden light to surge and it would bind him slightly tighter with every trigger. Xiaoji strode lightly toward the steward. Slam! The Imperial Emperor's personal attendant finally lost his balance as he was completely shackled and bound by this unseen energy. He fell onto the ground in front of Xiaoji face down with fresh blood flowing. Eunuch Mei watched in astonishment from afar. He had surmised that the steward might not be a match for the 7th Imperial Prince, but he never expected that the steward would be overpowered with just one move. Even though the steward did not get the chance to fight with his full strength, was this the 7th Imperial Prince's full power? The guards standing outside the city gates could not believe their eyes either. Was this really the 7th Imperial Prince who was under house arrest within the archive chamber for more than 2 years? Such a formidable charisma. Xiaoji walked toward the steward and looked down at the personal attendant. He lifted his boots suddenly. His foot was now stepping on the head of the steward. A vicious look crossed the steward's eyes. He wanted to struggle but every movement only meant that the golden light would tighten its grip further, even going so far as to create a deadly shackle on his nerves. It was just like he had been stripped of all his martial arts. Xiaoji said, "I will ask you a question, and you will answer me." The steward grunted coldly. He had been careless because he did not expect the 7th Imperial Prince to be so powerful. He had never thought that anyone would be able to overwhelm him so easily after he had successfully cultivated the skills of the sacred sunflower scroll. He screeched shrilly, Buddhist practitioners are compassionate by nature. You've studied Buddhist scriptures for 2 years, yet your ways are vicious. Aren't you contaminating your very nature? Crack. A focused thought appeared in his mind. The golden light beneath the steward's feet suddenly tightened, and even though the bones in those legs had been beaten down to the ground long ago, they were still sturdy, but under the tightened shackles of the golden light, an obvious collapse could be seen happening to the bones in his legs. The searing pain from the attack came suddenly, and even the steward could not take it as he shrieked in agony, "Ah, ah, ah." Xia Ji had not an ounce of mercy in his heart. Retaining any mercy would be equivalent to passing a dagger to his enemy. It would be an act of a lady's soft nature. He had stayed in the archive chamber for 2 years, just like the monkey named Sun who had been suppressed under the 5-Finger Mountain for 2 years. Monkey Sun had at least been led to the western heaven and attained immortality, but what about him? Someone had led him too, but it was to his death. If he was not able to lift this particular mountain, he would have been a worthless loser who had been used as a tool his whole life by the imperial family to only end up dying in vain. Xia Ji did not bother to explain. All he did was said casually, "Any more nonsense out of you, and next up are your hands. Your legs are broken now, but you can still utilize the embroidery vigor while in a wheelchair. If your hands are shattered too, you would truly end up as a worthless man with no value whatsoever. Am I correct, steward?" The steward's forehead beaded with sweat as his entire body trembled. His face was pale. Xia Ji continued, "Not if you understand. Curse me again if you don't understand me." A chill spread from his heart as the steward listened to this eerily calm voice. He nodded quickly while gulping breathlessly for air. "The tiger tally and authority seal, where are they?" "In my pockets." Xia Ji bent down directly and searched around the man's pockets, removing a complete piece of metallic tiger tally and a jade seal wrapped within a red silk cloth bag. He stowed them into his own pockets before smiling warmly. "Very good. See, we're able to build trust between us, aren't we?" This warmth helped relax the atmosphere somewhat. Xia Ji suddenly asked another question, "How did my mother die?" The steward was taken aback. It was clear that he did not expect the 7th Imperial Prince to ask this. The steward was about to reply. However, Xia Ji interrupted him immediately. "Don't bother mentioning death by assassination. It'll just end with you having your hands destroyed." The steward's mouth was open, but he could not bring himself to say the words because he had indeed planned to say that it was an assassination. In fact, the story about the assassination was so seamless that it was capable of withstanding any investigation. Xia Ji noticed his silence and asked abruptly, "Did Imperial concubine Wan kill her?" The steward reacted immediately by shaking his head. Xia Ji gave a moment's pause before suddenly smiling warmly. "Then, was it the Imperial Emperor who killed her?" The steward was dumbstruck. Chapter 12. By yourself. The steward was momentarily stunned, but quickly shook his head. "No, it was not His Highness." "Then who is it?" Xia Ji removed his boot from the head of the steward. He crouched down and smiled. "This bad blood belongs to someone else, but your life belongs to you. Clarify this for me and I swear in the name of Buddha that I will not kill you. I might even let you go. Just look for yourself. I may be acting heartlessly, but this is the result of my years of suffering. Anyone in my position would want to vent their anger, but I've spent 2 years studying Buddhist scriptures. The abbot of Lain Temple had even passed judgment on me, saying I'm made of 7 parts spirit of Buddha. If it were not for that, I would never be able to return from the abyss of misery. You should at least trust him even if you don't trust me, no. Although, if you insist on keeping mum, I am still made of 3 parts demonic nature and I don't mind torturing you to death. It was your doing that I wasn't able to read a single book of skill manual when I was first imprisoned within the archive chamber, wasn't it?" The steward continued to be silent. He was acutely aware that there was no way for him to worm his way out of this predicament, but he truly was not allowed to say a thing about it. Xia Ji was not in a rush. He said warmly, "How about this, let me analyze the situation for you. If this was a serious matter that might invoke the wrath of someone you can't offend, then take a guess what this person would do once he finds out that I've captured Yuan." He swept his gaze on those 300 soldiers and laughed. "And if one of these young brothers had spread the word about it, do you think that specific somebody will send someone over to silence you via assassination?" The steward's expression froze. Xia Ji continued, if this was no serious matter and the mastermind was someone you can afford to offend, then why should you die for the sake of this person? If you're harboring some sort of hope that someone is coming here to save you, then why not give it some thought? Would your savior bother to come to the aid of a steward with a pair of broken legs? Humph. Ha 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 ha. Xia Ji suddenly raised his head and howled with laughter. He laughed like the rustling of the wind and snow. He laughed like a demonic dragon's prolonged howling. The steward was dumbstruck by his laughter. How could he possess this perception and say such words if he had not seen through the ways of the world? The 7th Imperial Prince's words had tempted him. This prince had hidden his true self far too well. The golden light tightened again without warning while Xia Ji was laughing erratically. The steward felt a searing pain in his right arm and a clear sound of a broken bone crunching reached his ear. Ah! The unexpected pain caused the high-ranking eunuch to scream in agony. The surrounding soldiers and eunuch held anxious breaths as they watched the 7th Imperial Prince's actions. Why? Xia Ji's laughter stopped. I was worried that you'd be optimistic enough to think that someone was willing to save a master with broken legs, but now since your right arm is also useless, take a guess. If the person saving you appeared right in front of you, do you think he'll still see any value in you worth saving? The steward mulled it over for a long time and finally came to a decision. He closed his eyes tightly and his sweaty, pale face started to turn bright red. There was a look on Xia Ji's face as he swiftly applied pressure on a few of the steward's pressure points. He completely blocked the steward's vital energy circulation, rendering the steward powerless to channel his vital energy. They stared at each other in the eyes. Xia Ji said, you don't look like it, but you actually have some loyalty in you. You would rather kill yourself than say another word. The steward was prepared to die. He stared at Xia Ji coldly for quite a while before suddenly letting out a burst of pitiful yet shrill laughter. Gui Fang will arrive at the city in 3 days and even Quan Rong is entering via the Wolf Restraining Pass to get a share of the prize. On top of that, numerous great bandits and exotic tribes from beyond the Great Wall are also making their way here. This is a dance of demons and monsters, every one of them hankering for a taste of the prosperity belonging to the Dashang dynasty. How long can today's victory sustain you? Even if you escape, you'll still end up alone in the end. If you don't escape, then you will perish alongside this imperial city and end up fulfilling the wishes of His Highness. I admit that I was blind to not have seen the true colors of a demonic dragon like you, which is why I deserve death. When my death comes, I'll make sure to slow my pace in the netherworld. Who knows, you might come down soon to join me on the walk there. Ha! Ha 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 ha. He was trying to goad Xia Ji. He wanted to goad Xia Ji into killing him. However, Xia Ji was not angered. Instead, he suddenly said, want to make a bet? The steward stared at the prince with wide eyes. Xia Ji said, I'll let you live and let you witness for yourself how I will protect this city. The steward dropped all reservations as he replied sarcastically, by yourself. Can you even hold the fort? Xia Ji said, if I manage to protect the city, then you will agree to betray the imperial emperor. The steward retorted, and if you fail, I'll watch how those exotic tribes balance your head on their swords. So, the bet is on. The steward gave it some thought and said shrilly, I'll take the bet. Xia Ji narrowed his eyes at the steward while the men sneered back at him. With that, Xia Ji casually released the steward from the pressure point hold and the golden light instantly loosened as it evaporated from within the steward's body. The golden light transformed into 33 prayer beads and returned to Xia Ji's hands. The glow on the beads looked slightly dimmer, but otherwise, everything seemed to be as normal. Right at that moment, almost seamlessly, the steward raised his left hand and a string of red thread shot out from this left sleeve. The red thread hung onto an embroidery needle that sailed through the air, bursting out in a chilling glow. The glow vanished among the 300 soldiers. The steward was highly trained in martial arts. Even though his legs and right arm were now useless, his inner vitality was still able to make minor circulations within his dantian. Even though his strength was fairly diminished, he was still able to pull off the embroidery vigor from the sacred sunflower scroll. Ah! A painful scream could be heard from among the soldiers. A soldier had suddenly fallen to the ground, right in front of the doors of the icy-cold palace. Fresh blood was gushing out from between his brows. The steward tried his best to withstand the searing pain racking his body and suddenly called out a few names: Nzitsong, Mu Weiji, Shi Yunling, Su Qi. Bring those 4 immediately to see me, I have some urgent business with them. Xia Ji glanced at the soldiers. Go get them. Fail to bring the 4 of them here and you'll make up for it with your own heads. The remaining soldiers had just witnessed the 7th Imperial Prince's forceful actions. None of them dared to disobey. Moreover, those 4 were just normal soldiers. The duty roster had clearly stated their whereabouts and they wasted no time to look for them. It was not long before the 4 people were brought over. The 4 saw the soldier lying dead on the ground and next spotted the heavily injured steward. Their expressions changed as they turned to attempt an escape. While scurrying about to get away, they demonstrated fairly nimble skills that had far surpassed the abilities of an ordinary soldier, but the steward was not about to let them get away. A flash of the red thread from his sleeve and the 4, who had just turned their backs on them, immediately fell heavily to the ground. Blood quickly splashed across their faces and dyed the thin layer of snow on the ground red. They were clearly dead. After he was done with this, the steward laughed coldly as he looked at Xia Ji. He said in a low, grim voice, 7th Imperial Prince, I've already made arrangements with the spies left behind to guard me. His Highness would temporarily remain unaware of what had happened here. There's no need for you to fear that I would be done in by assassins sent by the mastermind behind me. Xia Ji knew that this eunuch had eyes and ears in every corner of the palace. Even though he usually pretended not to know a thing, he was acutely aware of who was spying on him. Now that he had killed these 5 people, it was a fair amount of insurance. He smiled and said, this is how trust is built, isn't it? The steward recalled how his right arm was broken right after the 7th Imperial Prince said those words and could not help laughing shrilly with a feeling of resentment. I don't want any trust. What I want is to see you dead. If you can't protect the city, I'll stand on the city walls and watch you perish horribly, ha ha ha. Xia Ji was not angered by this. He calmly asked, what if you lose? The steward replied simply, whatever it is you want to know, I'll tell you everything and anything. Chapter 13. Living and dying together. The soldiers did not bother to wait for the 9th Imperial Princess as they quietly buried the 5 bodies. Eunuch Mei found a wheelchair and brought the steward back to the palace to treat his wounds. Both had suffered serious damage after going up against the 7th Imperial Prince, especially the steward. It was frankly a miracle that he was still alive after being wounded so badly. Those with powerful abilities had tougher dispositions and the steward, with his level of prowess, was even able to maintain consciousness even though 3 of his limbs were broken. He wanted to curse Eunuch Mei. How could the old man be so blind as to not notice a thing after watching the 7th Imperial Prince for 2 years? However, when the words came to his lips, he did not voice them. Out. It would not help the situation even if he said them. He looked at Eunuch Mei's severed arm. It looked like he really had no idea what was going on. The steward sighed lightly. The 7th Imperial Prince had studied Buddhist scriptures for more than 2 years and yet he was still capable of such brutal conduct. Just how much obsession was the 7th Imperial Prince hiding? Obsession makes one a demon, letting go makes one a Buddha. To be fair, the 7th Imperial Prince was truly the demon of a generation. It was just too bad that he was dealt a lousy hand in life. The clamoring din eventually quietened down. The bloodstains in front of the palace were also cleaned up. Xia Ji looked at the sky. Xiaosu should be returning soon, which was why he stayed where he was and leaned against the icy-cold palace wall, waiting. It was not long before a bronze carriage appeared from afar. The carriage moved slowly across the snow and debris. It crossed the long, white bridge before stopping right in front of Xia Ji. The wooden window was thrown open and Xia Xiaosu's face appeared. She spotted her older brother in front of the palace and her expression became fearful. She quickly called out for the carriage to stop and lifted her long dress while hopping off the carriage. Her petite face looked around nervously. When she noticed the palace was unusually empty, she finally whispered, "Big brother, get on the carriage, quick. I'll take you to the archive chamber." Xia Ji did not move. Xia Xiaosu got anxious. She immediately grabbed her big brother's hand and tried to pull him into the carriage, but she was powerless and got pulled in by Xia Ji instead. Xia Ji pulled out the tiger tally, authority seal, and the imperial decree from his pockets. I'm now standing guard at the imperial capital and have been bestowed the title of Grand Marshal of the world. Xia Xiaosu had question marks etched all over her face as she took the imperial decree from her brother, half believingly and half suspiciously. The imperial decree did not lie. Everything had been written out clearly. Xia Ji explained, the heir apparent is dead and the exotic tribes are too ruthless, which is why the imperial emperor has fled with the rest of the imperial family. This was really big news and it stunned Xia Xiaosu right where she was. Xia Ji continued, Guifang will take a little more than 2 days before their soldiers reach the city. Xia Xiaosu could hardly believe this and said, the heir apparent's army of 100,000 did not stop them. They're all dead. After saying those 3 words, Xia Ji took the opportunity to tease her further as he smiled and said, didn't you praise the heir apparent earlier for earning merit with an enduring achievement when he put on his golden armor for an expedition to the border? Tell me, aren't you poisoned milk? Xia Xiaosu stared at her toes and insisted, I'm not. The heir apparent had such a clear advantage, so why did he die? Yikes, big brother, let's stop talking about this. Xia Xiaosu bit her lip and moved closer to him, saying in a quiet voice, let's make a run for it. Don't take up that silly mantle of Grand Marshal of the world. Let's escape to the south. Xia Ji said, they went to the south. Xia Xiaosu urged, then we'll head east. If that still doesn't work out, we'll escape across the seas and go into hiding till we die of a ripe old age. Xia Ji suddenly said, Mother was murdered by someone. Xiao Xiaosu went silent for a moment. Her eyes suddenly turned red. Who? Xia Ji replied, I don't know yet. I'll send you to the east tomorrow. What about you? Xiaosu, I am a little stronger than you imagine. There might be a chance I can protect this city. I have too many things I need to do, so I can't leave, nor do I want to leave and forever become a rat that can only hide his face. Xia Ji lifted his head to look at the snow dancing in the air as he spoke soulfully. Xia Xiaosu gasped, Big brother, do you want to be the hero who saves the imperial city? Xia Ji smiled. No. Xia Xiaosu asked curiously, then what? Xia Ji touched his sister's long hair, which was fine and soft, as he said quietly, I just feel that the ones who should be running are those exotic tribes. That's enough for now, tomorrow I'll make the arrangements to send you away from the imperial city and head for the eastern cities. Xia Xiaosu suddenly said, no. This time, it was Xia Ji who was stunned. Xia Xiaosu chuckled and said, it's just that, since the exotic tribes should be the ones to make a run for it, why should I leave? Xia Ji laughed as well. His sister had not noticed what she had just done. She trusted him so much, or rather, it was not about trust, it was the determination of them living and dying together. You leave, I leave. You stay, I stay. You live, I live. You die, I follow. He did not try to convince her anymore. All he did was reply very simply, stay, then. Watch how your big brother defeats the enemy. Xia Xiaosu wanted to tease and mock him with words like, stop boasting, would you, but the words that reached her lips turned into, I'll stand on the city walls and watch with my own eyes how you defeat those exotic tribes. When the time came, she would bring along an ice-cold dagger. If her brother dies, she would take her own life immediately. The road to the netherworld would not be lonely when she walked it, and she would even take the opportunity to tease her big brother after their deaths. Just look at you, boasting so much. You've boasted your way to death now, haven't you? Her big brother would surely be so dumbstruck, he would not be able to come back with a rebuttal. The thought of her big brother's embarrassed look made Xia Xiaosu laugh out loud. Xia Ji had the imperial decree instructing him to guard the imperial city, and the fact that he was a prince helped him take control of the palace very quickly. Some were not entirely convinced to obey him, but the story of how the 7th imperial prince had suppressed the steward had spread because of those 300 guards, and even those who were not convinced ended up giving in. The soldiers that could be mobilized using the tiger tally were already within the imperial city. There were a total of 50,000 soldiers who were led by an old general who had a stubborn temper named Deng Ju. Xia Ji sent out soldiers that night, adding on the stamp of Grand Marshal of the World, to request for the general to meet him in the palace. He took the free time he had to visit the imperial family's new archive chamber. The heir apparent may have brought many books away with him, but there were still many of them left behind and a portion of them was stored here. Some of the other nobles had personal library lofts at home too. These nobles may have followed the imperial family down south, but they were unable to take all of their books with them. This was another portion. As for the books belonging to different sects and clans of renowned families in the imperial capital, there were currently no plans for Xiaji to touch them, as he did not want to create any unrest. He held a lamp as he went around the library loft, sometimes stopping here and there. He would pick up every book to read, flipping through page by page, reading it out loud to obtain skill beads. The palace maids, eunuchs, and guards on duties were filled with confusion over this temporary master of the palace, who would probably maintain his post for only a few days. The exotic tribes were arriving soon with their army, so why was he still engrossed with reading? However, Xiaji's sereneness had indirectly influenced them. When midnight came, the snow fell heavier, slowly rising to the level of one's ankle. Xiaji put down the book in his head and carefully experienced the green skill bead that had appeared in his mind. These skills were mostly artistic skill types, the names not even worth mentioning. He gave it some thought and reached out to grab another book. Right at this moment, the shrill voice of a eunuch outside the door could be heard from afar, announcing the arrival of General Deng Zhu. The voice came nearer from a distance. Before long, the door of the library loft was opened. Xiaji's finger pushed back the book he had just pulled out and he turned around, his calm expression facing the old general who had just opened the door. The general was still clad in armor and had obviously not gone home yet. He stared straight at the young men in the room, sizing up the prince with his eagle-like eyes. If he remembered correctly, the 7th imperial prince was only 17, right? Xiaji brandished his tiger tally and said out loud, "General Deng, please come in. I won't be inviting you for tea when the situation is so tense right now." Deng Zhu said grimly, "What tea should a man who is about to have his head hung around another's waist have?" He walked into the library loft and closed the door behind him. His gaze swept across the books within the loft. It had messy titles with a bit of everything. Reading books before the great battle. What was this prince up to? Xiaji did not bother with small talk when he saw the general walk in. He asked directly, "The exotic tribes have managed to get through Wolf Restraining Pass and exterminated the heir apparent and his army of 100,000. They are currently headed straight for the imperial city and will arrive in 3 days. What does the general think about this?" Deng Zhu glanced at this prince with his smooth and tender body. He sort of guessed that this was the scapegoat left behind by the imperial family, but this prince was known for his Buddhist nature and right now, he was acting calm and composed, with no signs of planning a hasty escape. This propelled the general to look him straight in the eye respectfully. A slight laugh escaped from him as he said, "Does the 7th imperial prince want to hear the truth or a lie?" "How about the lie?" "We will follow every one of your instructions." "And the truth?" "I will die protecting the imperial capital. The capital will not be besieged as long as I remain standing." "How are you prepared to protect it?" Deng Zhu was slightly surprised, but he proceeded to explain his plans fully to the 7th imperial prince. There were a few skill beads involving the art of war stored in Xiaji's mind. Even though he had not absorbed that art of war, he nevertheless retained knowledge from before his transmigration, which helped him point out possible flaws within Deng Zhu's plan with probing questions such as, "If the enemy did this or that, what would you do?" He had an unrestrained mind, and while Deng Zhu may be a veteran general, there were moments when the general could not see a situation clearly due to his close involvement. They discussed through the night with only the candlelight to accompany them and finally stopped after 4 hours, where they managed to finalize a tighter defense plan. The old general may have been done with the discussion, but he felt he had more to offer. He was usually quite long-winded and even his subordinates had to force themselves to listen to him without falling asleep. He had never expected this prince to be able to keep up with his rhythm. Xiaji said, "You may take your leave, General Deng. Oh, another thing. I hope you will protect the imperial city with your life. If the city falls under siege, you may well fall with it. Meanwhile, the tiger tally may be in my hands, but I won't interfere with you making arrangements for the soldiers. You may act according to circumstances and there is no need to specifically go through me for anything." Deng Zhu replied, "Please don't worry, 7th Imperial Prince. I would rather die fighting in the imperial city than make an escape. I would never leave a black mark on my strength of character. Only, I have something to ask of you." "What would that be?" Deng Zhu took a deep breath and said loudly, I'd like to ask the 7th Imperial Prince to stand guard till the very end. If you feel that I can no longer hold the fort, then please leave the Imperial capital from the East Gate. But for now, you are the soldiers' morale. If you leave, the morale of our soldiers will drop to the lowest point. Xia Ji retorted, why would I leave? Deng Ju was taken aback. You mean you're not leaving? Xia Ji shook his head calmly. No, I'm not. Do you have any other questions? Deng Ju was stunned. This situation was not what he imagined at all. It was only until this young prince had turned away to read another book that he suddenly gave a start. He looked at the prince's figure with mixed emotions as he bowed slightly and gently rephrased his words, Marshal, in that case, I shall take my leave. Chapter 14. Scriptures on the left hand, demonic halberd on the right. The snowy night was silent. Even Xia Xiaosu, who had earlier come to deliver mutton soup for supper, had returned to her room to sleep. However, the candlestick in the library loft held bright for the rest of the night, and Xia Ji spent the entire night poring over book after book. The next morning, he did not bother to rest and immediately brought a small entourage and headed for the mansions of a few nobles. At each location, he headed straight for the owner's libraries and cooped himself there for 8 to 10 hours. He picked up things here and there, and stayed until he found most of the books he wanted. It was already dawn on the third day after he finished visiting 3 mansions. The snow continued to fall crazily and the 7th Imperial Prince, who was the only royalty left within the imperial capital, wrapped himself up in fox furs and walked through the streets of the imperial city, passing by the common folk who were still unaware of what was about to happen. He walked toward the sealed-up imperial palace. He returned to the palace and slept until noontime. After having lunch with Xia Xiaosu, he went to the imperial armory and opened the door. It was in a chaotic condition. Everything had been turned over in a great mess and the more valuable weapons had already been taken away. Whatever that was left was either too heavy or were deemed too ordinary. The guards waited outside the door and echoing footsteps could be heard coming from the imperial armory. The eunuch in charge of the armory followed carefully behind the young imperial prince with his hands tucked in his sleeves. The imperial prince was now the master of the imperial palace. Every time the imperial prince stopped, he would quickly provide a detailed explanation of the weapon in front of the imperial prince. Xia Ji asked, which were the most powerful weapons previously kept in the armory. The armory eunuch quickly explained, there are 3 weapons that were known as immortal weapons, which are the Xianyuan dragon sword, Juk Tranquility spear, and the Great Darkness halberd. Were they all taken? Reporting to the 7th Imperial Prince, the Great Darkness halberd was not taken. Why was that? It's because of the misfortune it brings when carried. This is a demonic halberd capable of corrupting people. Legend has it that this halberd had caused a bloodbath a few hundred years ago and was later sealed and suppressed within the imperial palace, but its demonic energy was not diminished because of it. Rather, it has strengthened. So, it has been abandoned here. Why is it known as a demonic halberd? Legend says that this halberd was the power to corrupt the hearts and minds of men, rendering them mentally disturbed. All but one of its past owners had ended up losing their minds. The one who had been exempted had cut off his vital energy circulation, destroyed his martial arts, and spent the rest of his life with an oil lamp before Buddha's statue, which spared him from the tragedy. Take me to it. The armory eunuch led the way and soon they arrived at a corner of the armory. There was a stone coffin in the corner. There was nothing placed within 10 feet of the stone coffin, which laid isolated in empty space. The eunuch scurried forward toward it and pushed the coffin open with all his strength, and it revealed a huge halberd with double crescents lying quietly within. It was 18 feet long with a form that struck a resemblance to the legendary heavenly designed halberd, Tn. Heavenly designed halberd or Fang Tian Hua Ji refers to a beautifully or colorfully designed halberd that had been helmed by legendary heroes featured in stories such as Romance in the Three Kingdoms and Water Margin, although this halberd was completely black and had a strange and curious aura about it. Just being close to it could make you feel like the air had chilled rapidly and could make a person's hair stand on end. The armory eunuch felt a wave of terror in his heart. He felt like he was being stared at by a man-eating demon from the darkness by just looking at the black halberd. The fear instinctively propelled him to move forward and close the coffin. He had just taken a step forward when Xia Ji suddenly raised his hand to stop him. Who says you can touch it? The armory eunuch immediately said, 7th Imperial Prince, this is a weapon of misfortune, anyone who even sees it will suffer a Before he could finish, Xia Ji had bent over to pick up this black halberd. His fingers wrapped tightly around its handle. The strange and curious dark energy suffused from between his fingers and penetrated his skin. Some of that energy slithered onto him like a long snake, crawling from his arm to his neck, making it all the way up to between his eyes. However, it took only a moment for the tendrils of energy to retreat suddenly, as if they had been electrocuted, and they seeped back into the black halberd. Xia Ji had mastered the 9th level of Trailokya Dhyana. In the spiritual world, he was just like a walking Buddha. Let alone the demonic energy emanating from this demonic weapon, even if he were to take a stroll amidst demonic energy, or take a nap within it, he would never be corrupted. He lifted the black halberd. The dark energy surrounding the halberd slithered around the weapon like a demonic snake, constricting it. The darkness yearned to crawl up the arms of this young prince, but it did not dare to, and it slowed down significantly. Xia Ji gave it some thought and said, "I shall take this weapon." The armory eunuch was so frightened by this that he momentarily forgot his status and quickly urged, "Don't do it, you really shouldn't do it, this." Xia Ji cocked his head to the side and the eunuch shut his mouth from just one look. He swallowed and stepped 2 steps back in fear. He wondered what he should do to talk this stubborn imperial prince out of it. They were deep into winter, but the eunuch felt himself sweating all over as he kept raising his sleeves to wipe the sweat off his forehead. Xia Ji did not comment on this but asked immediately, "Are there any demonic armors that are sealed away? If so, take me to them." The imperial armory had many treasures kept within it. The imperial emperor would surely not have taken demonic weapons or arms of misfortune along with him when he retreated. Naturally, they would be left behind, or rather, for lack of a better word, they were abandoned by him. The armory eunuch led the way and they soon arrived at an obscure and hidden corner. A set of beast-themed chain armor hung on an iron rack at the corner. The beast's eyes were shut tight, revealing only a narrow slit. Only 2 chilling glows could be vaguely seen if viewed from afar. The chain armor was bounded by 14 chains inscribed with golden Sanskrit. It looked to be a Buddhist instrument used for sealing. Xia Ji raised his hand to grab the binding chain, crushing it forcefully. Before he could utilize his full strength, the golden Sanskrit on the chains came to life, swarming toward him like numerous tadpoles. At that moment, a golden light dazzled, as if to defend itself against this enemy who was attacking them. The armory eunuch immediately voiced out at this. He wanted to put a stop to this young imperial prince's insanity. 7th Imperial Prince, this is a Buddhist chain that was created by many holy monks in Buddhist ceremonies. Even trying to break it with an immortal weapon won't make it budge, much less any attempts to crush it. Why don't we just look at other armors? However, Xia Ji was not convinced by the eunuch at all. He suddenly gave a gesture of courtesy and respect with his left hand and a Buddhist light shone all over him, the zen within him suddenly escalating. He reached out his right hand once again. It grew 18 times its normal size. Each growth represented a level of hell and the 18 became 1. This was the 18 levels of hell suppression form. He grabbed the chain once again with a smile on his face. The golden Sanskrit seemed to be spellbound by this Buddha's intention and eventually evaporated. Following that, Xia Ji crushed the chains one by one with ease right in front of the eyes of the panicking eunuch. Ding, ding, ding. The chains with the golden Sanskrit broke one by one. The golden light enveloping them vanished immediately and they were reduced to pieces of metallic iron that fell heavily onto the ground. As the last chain was snapped, a chilling wind rose within the armory. The demonic armor burst into life like a miniature black, raging sun. Dark smoke filled the air as the candle lights in the room and the sunlight shining in from outside the room extinguished completely. The armory eunuch could no longer hold in the fear within him as he gave a terrified scream and made a panicked run for it. He tumbled halfway through his escape, but continued clambering toward the outside world with every ounce of strength in him. His tears flowed freely and he even wet his pants, but he no longer felt anything. Xia Ji stood where he was alone, his palms cutting through the darkness as he gently caressed the demonic armor. The dark demonic energy flooded outward like a burst water reservoir. The demonic energy capable of corrupting heart and mind had now engulfed his entire body. However, all the young imperial prince did was to continue smiling. It was like Buddha smiling with a flower in his hand while at the immortal's abode. The heart of a Buddha should be bare. That means a Buddha could not come into contact with any flowers nor be stained by materialistic notions. Since the heart of the Buddha is bare, where in his world would there be flowers, where would there be materialistic notions? The immaterial is the material is also the immaterial. Nothing exists within his world, so how would dust settle upon him? That was why Buddha was able to smile while holding onto a flower, while the monks who observed the commandments could not understand the meaning behind this. All they could do was deliberate it deeply. Kassapa was the only one who smiled at this, which was why Kassapa inherited the teachings. At that moment, Xiaji was standing amidst the thickening demonic energy, but his mental state of mind remained the same. He possessed the Trailokya dhyana, and according to the principles of Buddhist law, he had long overcome the abyss of misery. This was an extremely polarized contradiction. If there was obsession within, one would not be able to attain enlightenment, therefore one could not overcome the abyss of misery. Yet, he had managed to overcome it, but somehow still possessed a huge obsession within him. It was because he was not deeply obsessed, yet at the same time was unrestricted from his deep obsession. His heart was rendered with obsession, and the obsession was one with his heart. That was why there was obsession within him, and also none within him at the same time. His heart and mind were free from the corruption of the world's dust. Part 1 of the series ends here. Thank you for watching and listening. If you find it interesting, please give us a like, a comment and a subscription so that we have the motivation to make the next videos.